His dad's voice in his own voice. Here's my one. Why didn't I refresh our YouTube? I think probably the last 4 years, yeah, like every other year for 4 different times, for about 8 or 10 years. And Marvin was there. Yes. Make sure you retire. So he can work a little bit harder in the back of the shop.
That's right.
We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order for July 22nd, 2019. Please stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can I get a motion for the approval of tonight's agenda, please?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. Consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered routine and have been made available to the City Council at least 2 days in advance of the meeting. The items will be enacted in one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the agenda and considered normal sequence. On tonight's docket, we have City Council meeting minutes for July 8th, 2019, resolution approving disbursements through July 22nd, 2019, personnel actions, and public dance permit for the Giant celebration. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to add in regards to the consent agenda? If not, I entertain a motion for the approval of tonight's consent agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda is approved. Public comment. Public comment provides an opportunity for the public to address the council on items that are not on the agenda. Comments will be limited to 5 minutes per person. Persons wishing to make a comment must sign up in advance of the meeting on the sheet provided and identify themselves by providing a name and address. On tonight's public comment, we've got 6 individuals that have signed up. 5 of the individuals have to do with the Coventry resident situation, so we're going to go ahead and address that when we get to line item 7 alpha. So, Mr. Isaac Lindstrom, would you like to come on up and speak in regards to the solar that you have to say?
Hi, my name's is on here? I'll speak loudly. My name's Isaac. I'm the All Energy Solar representative here on behalf of the Diebols. They are interested in doing a solar array, and you guys are in the works of redoing your solar ordinance. And one of the provisions, I kind of want to make 3 key points about the ordinance that I had some thoughts about when I was reviewing it. The first one was the restriction of tilt-ups on pitched roofs. Their particular project does have tilt-ups on a pitched roof just to have more adequate access to sun, just so it's completely southern facing as opposed to east-west facing. So that's the first thing that I would like to see you guys consider potentially removing from your ordinance, because it does restrict sun access for particular roofs and ridge lines that aren't completely southern facing, or for residents that do elect to have a tilt up on their home just due to aesthetic reasons, or they want to get more sun access and better production of their arrays. Secondly, I wanted to bring up the point of just allowing ground mounts in more districts than you guys do already. I think in your ordinance you can build an accessory garage up to 1,000 square feet in pretty much any district. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I would like just more access to ground mount arrays throughout the city. We do ground mounts, various jurisdictions throughout the state. Ranging from extremely rural to more residential. Even in Minneapolis and St. Paul, there's a few ground mounts. And also wanted to bring up the fact that the square footage limit that you're placing on it is considerably it's a very small array. Right now at the 300 square feet, that's only 13 panels, and the smallest system we do is 8 panels. So this is a really small system that you're putting a restriction on. And I guess my main point is I want to, not make this ordinance restrictive by any means, and just make sure that there's adequate regulations in place that are beneficial to both the industry and obviously your citizens. So you can take any questions or comments or anything that you guys think of as well. So.
Any questions for Mr. Lindstrom?
I have a request. Could you get those to our city administrator in writing so that we can track those better, please?
I did briefly email over some comments.
Thank you. It's just hard
months ago.
to get the detail as you speak.
Yeah.
I tried to make notes, but it won't be as good as if you had to write.
Okay, yeah, and I can definitely send a follow-up email as well tomorrow morning. So.
You have that.
I think it worked the same.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much, sir.
All right, thank you.
Is there anybody else within the audience that would like to address City Council outside of the Coventry Road discussion? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to go ahead and close public comment.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. First item on tonight's docket for the regular agenda is 7 Alpha, which is the Coventry Road discussion. City Administrator Kruger.
Mayor Hague, members of the City Council, tonight we're going to have an open discussion about the potential opening of Coventry Road, which is adjacent to Elmwood Avenue, or in conjunction with the Trunk Highway 112 Turnback project. This is driven by a lot of community outreach to, I think, the City Council administration about this, and it's good to have a discussion about the reasons why this is being proposed to be open and the process moving forward. So a little bit of the discussion here. We want to discuss Coventry Road. We're going to talk a little bit about the history, engineering guidelines, emergency services input, neighborhood planning considerations, neighborhood input that I've received, some insurance and liability questions that we have some answers to, and then talk a little bit about Elmwood Avenue and the speed limits on that section of road. Just to recap the discussion process, I'll give a report. I think then the City Council will open up the public comment process so that residents and people here in attendance can comment about the potential opening of this intersection, and then a council discussion and if there's any staff direction. So a little bit about the history from what I found. I'll be honest, it was difficult to find any information about the opening and closing of Coventry. We've reached out to the Minnesota Department of Transportation, hoping that they would have some permanent records. The one and only record that we have is a request from city administration in 1995 to open up that intersection. And at that time, it was denied due to sightline considerations at that time for a 40-mile-an-hour speed zone. I've heard from members in the neighborhood that this intersection has been opened and closed up to 4 times since 1977. I haven't been able to find any information in city council packets about the reasons why. Admittedly, our packet information is in the process of being basically having the characters recognized in the document so that you can search them. So the process of searching them right now is actually pulling the physical copies and looking at them, trying to find an agenda that has an item. So it's kind of a needle in a haystack. We might be able to find some more information council-wise once that process is done being OCR'd. But MnDOT had one record. There's no doubt in my mind that there's other information out there about the opening and closing of it. I just have been unable to find adequate history of that intersection. The current conditions right now that you see at Coventry Road at Elmwood Avenue is a 30-mile-an-hour zone, and it's closed to all traffic. There's a barricade. Nobody can get through it, bikes, emergency vehicles, anything like that. So I'll move on to the engineering considerations. We do have our city engineer, Corey Beanfang, in attendance if there are questions from city council related to engineering aspects. Also, our city attorney has knowledge of standards and things like that required for the intersection regarding safety elements. So Basically, the engineering has reviewed the road intersection, both our city engineer, the county engineer, and the county project engineer, which, full disclosure, is Bolton and Mink as well. So different groups of Bolton and Mink are working for the county and the city. All of the proposed intersections will meet all MnDOT and AASHTO safety requirements. Elmwood Avenue road profile modifications will improve the conditions. It is a hill right now. There's some sightline things that you might notice when you're driving down the hill in the northern direction. But there are things that are going to be done and proposed to improve that section of road. Continuing on with engineering considerations, there is a document that I've circulated with City Council regarding sightline calculations calculated by our city engineer. Right now, what's being proposed with the current road profile section, there will be 595 feet of sight distance from a table that I believe they pull out of the MnDOT intersection design standards. The 30-mile-an-hour required sight distance is 400 feet and 50, so there's concerns, and we'll talk a little bit about that, about speeding on Elmwood Avenue. 50-mile-an-hour required sight distance is 555 feet. So both of those would meet under the proposed conditions, the sightline requirements that our engineering staff uses to design and evaluate intersections. A little bit more about the profile modifications. At the peak height of the hill that we're talking about at Mound Cemetery, there will be about a 1.9 foot cut of that hill peak. And then there will also be a reduction of 1% in the actual slope. So the slope would go from, I believe, 5% to 4% in that section, if you're traveling north from the peak of the hill towards Coventry. Here's a little section. If anybody's interested in obtaining these documents, there are some copies of that our city clerk have to look at. But looking at it, it's essentially the same information I just shared with you about sightlines. Moving into neighborhood input, and we do have a good group of people here tonight. I believe there's a petition that's been circulating about the opening or potential opening of the intersection. So it's great that the public is engaged in talking about this. The major concern that I'm hearing from the group is that there's safety concerns with the opening of it. A lot of them are related to speeds on Elmwood Avenue. So again, the speeding potentially of people coming down that hill in a 30-mile-an-hour zone. Also increasing through traffic in the neighborhood. Proximity of the southern driveway to the intersection, so the property owner on the southern side of Coventry that is directly adjacent to Elmwood Avenue inquired about their driveway proximity to the actual road. And then also one that I just heard today was slope concern on Coventry Road itself outside of what the project limits would be for the Trunk Highway 112 project. So those are some concerns that I've documented and have tried to address in emails and phone calls. But I'm sure we'll hear more about those concerns in public comment. A couple things that have come from City Council have been liability concerns. City Attorney John Skubitz has prepared a legal memo that's been included in your packet of information as well. Attorney Skubitz, if I misquote you at all, basically there's no increase in liability if safety standards are met. So those AASHTO and MnDOT standards are met with engineering review. Again, our engineer looks at these things when they look at these intersections. Engineers by trade are ethically obligated to follow laws and provide us the best input that they can. I have been going back and forth with our League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust representative Troy Walsh about this, along with Jeff McDonald from Canopy Group, who's kind of coordinating that conversation. Very similar sentiment. We don't have an official statement from League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust, but essentially he echoed that if those standards, those engineering standards for safety are met, the city is at no more risk of liability related to if there's an accident or something like that on that intersection. And also League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust, we've been talking to them. Emergency services review, we reached out to the 3 emergency services groups that are pertinent in this area, the fire department, police department, and the ambulance service. In the packet, you'll see statements from each one of those groups. We do have the police chief here for city council if there are any questions, in particular about emergency services. I think he can summarize for all of them. The planning considerations when you're looking at the neighborhood itself, when that when that neighborhood was originally designed, the Coventry Road was designed as a local collector street. So if you look at the actual aerial image of the neighborhood, that's a through street. It's stubbed in to serve communities to the east potentially, if there's future development, and also communities to the south from there. So we have right of way that's already been platted for the city to extend those roads. So looking at the traffic flow design of the neighborhood, it's essential to aid in traffic flow for the current neighborhood and also essential for future growth to the south and east. And I want to talk and probably focus a little bit on Elmwood Avenue speeding and some things that we found out there. So there's definite concerns about the speed at which traffic travels on Elmwood Avenue, not only adjacent to Coventry Road, but also including a lot of that area. We along with a lot of other cities have challenges with speed reduction from our outer corridors. So you're coming in from the county at 55. Right now you roll into a 50 mile an hour zone when you come into the city, and then you eventually hit a 30 mile an hour zone. So you step it down, but it's fairly easy, and we do write a fair amount of tickets on Elmwood Avenue for speeding. So what we've talked about with our engineering staff and the county are things that we can do to help maybe make drivers more aware of their speed, because they might not be speeding on purpose. It might just feel like they should be driving faster. So they might not be paying as much attention. One thing that we can input on that street is a dynamic speed sign. There's no doubt that this group has probably seen those in other communities, where it tells you the speed limit and it tells you what your speed is. It can give you some actual interaction where some lights flash, things like that, and kind of make you aware that you are speeding in the zone is 30 miles an hour. One thing I want to talk about is enforcement in that area as well. Like we would do with any sort of intersection or road change, there would be increased enforcement in that area. We'll likely look at that, and if this goes through, and just as a timeline for this, if Coventry is opened, we're looking at a 2021 type of road should be designed. Now there's some, I believe, legislation going through that gives local entities potentially some additional control over speed limits. But one thing we have to keep in mind is that this isn't a local road, this is a county road, so the county would ultimately have that say. Now we have a good relationship and we can lobby the county and we can talk about them. But I don't think, and from the language of that legislation, that they would even have the ability to alter it from what MnDOT recommends. So with that, the point of this is to have an open discussion, talk about some of the issues that the neighborhood may think are in place, and then have city council ask staff, myself, and all of the support staff that is here if there's any questions. Likely, I anticipate this being an ongoing discussion, so don't feel any pressure to make any sort of decisions or direction at this time. But we do have some time to talk about this and have a good conversation. So, with that, that's my presentation. If we want to roll into the public comment and then city council discussion, that'd be great.
I'm going to entertain a motion then for open public comment for the Coventry Road discussion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. Mr. Darrell Lawrence, please.
Hi, my name is Bill Lawrence. I'm on 137 Coventry Road. You guys haven't lived there. We live there, and the speeding is horrendous. It's always been horrendous. You basically, they're coming in out of the Ottawa Road. It's probably 99% of the same people using that road, and it's the same people speeding. They know the speed limit. You can move that speed limit back if you want. I see trucks come over top that hill at 50 miles an hour. We were out there the other night and timing it, and you're just not gonna get across that intersection. There's just so many safety concerns there. My little hill, you know, there's a little bit of a grade. I've seen people come down that road too fast and hit the brakes and they slide into the barricade. Where you open that road, they're gonna go right out in that intersection and get creamed by one of them trucks. Couple thoughts we did have is, what about a cul-de-sac? Putting in a cul-de-sac. That was one idea. How about some electronic gates that ambulance, fire crew, the chief, or the squad cars can have? Maybe even you want to do snow plows and maybe waste management, and swing open for them. I just think there's way too many safety concerns up there for that. And then somebody commented, no, Dave, who was my neighbor there? Dave Smith was there since 1973. He's the one that said that road was open for less than 6 months. And he said it was shut down and it was never reopened. I don't know where that information came that it was open 4 times since 77. And the only other time is when they put Plum Run in and the city was going to open it up, and he made a phone call to the state, and the state said no because of the sight line. There's not enough sight. And I don't believe you're grading that hill down enough for a sight line. But that's kind of up to you guys. But I guess if you're going to go through with it, I'm going to sell. I'm going to sell my house, and I'm going to move to a different community, neighboring town. Because I bought that house, and we were told, you buy a house on a dead end, you usually pay up for a dead end road, and we were told that road would never be open. Well, here we are.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lyle Olson.
Gentlemen, I'm Lyle Olson. I live on the corner of Woodcrest and Coventry. I've lived on that corner since July of 1975, which means I've lived in that neighborhood for about 44 years. As Daryl has said, the person behind me, Dave Smith, has lived there since 1974. My neighbor across the street, Floyd Engel, has lived in that corner since 1974. And 2 houses to the north of me is a family that's lived there since 1973. I've talked to my neighbor across the street, my neighbor to the north, myself. None of us recall ever having to have the fire department show up for an incident. Never have we been able to recall needing the police department to show up. So, in my 50 years as an engineer, mechanical engineer with an expertise in problem solving, which I will put up against any of your engineering experience in problem solving, the big key is always what's the cost and what's the benefit. We heard from our city administrator that the benefits are, in my opinion, poorly defined. There's no dollar economics to those benefits, but there's going to be big dollar costs to those. And somebody's going to say, oh yeah, but that's state money. Well, I think there's a lot of places in this community that we could use state money if we could get some. So I think it's totally wrong to take a laissez-faire attitude about money. I think it's very prudent and good managerial expertise to look at a situation, say what are the negatives, what needs to be done, what are the positives, what's the cost benefit, and what's the payback. Now, payback is something the city administration, and I guess most cities in the state don't talk about. But the entrepreneurs, the people that own the businesses in this town, know exactly what that means, and that's one of their benchmarks to saying there's good management. Now, our city administrator in his opening comments said we're going to have an open discussion. Prior to the meeting being called to order, we were told by the mayor that we will not have a discussion. What we will have will be the opportunity for people to talk. The talk is not a discussion. I think all of us can understand that when somebody says something and another person says, oh yeah, but that makes me think about, and then another person says, yeah, but you haven't taken into account. That's a discussion. If we're allowed to be up here for 5 minutes, and less than that, if the people before us said some points we want to say, then we're not having a discussion. If every one of these people who speaks feels exactly the same way, and I'm going to guess there's 20 people here, how do you know what one person is saying? What I'm saying is one person or 20 folks. And the only way you will know that is if they get to stand up and say what they want to say in the way they want to say it, and it happens to coincide with what I say. So, Mr. Mayor, I disagree with the rule. I know you went to politically run agencies, the city administrator has, probably our attorney has, but we are a nation of free speech, not regulated speech. And I do not want this meeting to be a meeting of regulated speech.
We see this whole thing after hearing the comments from the town and from my neighbors, is that we have a police department that's part of the. Today, while driving in town, there was a young boy, probably 5 or 6 years old, on his bicycle, trying to get across Ferry Street, and there were 2 cars in front of me and 1 car coming in the opposite direction that would not yield to him, and he was in the crosswalk. So we have other issues in town relative to obeying traffic laws, and on Route 112. My belief is that we ought to open the road, open Coventry. We ought to more closely monitor the traffic on that road. Levy stiff fines for those that are caught speeding. And from my point of view, I've been using the alternate route to get to 112 for 7 years, and I still have the option of doing that. Is it more convenient to go out Coventry to 112 if I'm going towards La Center? Sure. But is it going to be a real concern? I have to go a few tenths of a mile out of the way? No, I've been doing it since I moved here to town. When we lived in Rhode Island, we had a small house fire. We lived on a lane that, now this house was built in 1950, had never had a fire in the house up to the point that we lived there, and we had been in there for probably close to 15 years. We had a fire in one place, and because of the restrictions on the lane that we lived on, the fire truck could not get to us. They had to park on a 4-lane highway and carry their equipment up our driveway and get to the house. Fortunately, the fire wasn't really bad enough that they couldn't put it out. But had it been any worse, they would not have been able to go there. Once again, I believe that it's to the overall advantage of the town to open this road, which was designed to be a through street. And with that, I'll pass it to the next in line. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Mr. Darrell Colden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm Darrell Colden. I live at 146 Coventry Road. There's a lot of debate on whether or not the road was ever open. My neighbor next door that's deceased quite a few years now was the first house up there, and he said it was never open, so I don't know if it ever was, but it sure hasn't been since I've been here for 40-some years. I've got a few concerns. One is why, when I talked with, when we had a meeting a year ago on these plans for this road, or for the new 112 development. I mean, I don't think there's anybody in the room that's against the 112 improvement. There's bike lanes and sidewalks, and it's going to be a nice thing for the community. I think it's a wonderful thing. Where my question comes from is, I'm listening to Corey. We had a discussion today, and we've talked other times, but a year ago, there was no plan to open Coventry Road on the initial plan. Now, a month and a half ago, when we had the meeting at City Hall, there's a plan to open up Coventry Road. I'm wondering what's precipitating that. What's the reason? It sounds like we baited the police department, the fire hall, and everybody. Would you like to have the road open? Yeah, it'd be better to have it open. I think you're going to hear about a petition that's going around. I get the impression there's a significant number of people that are against this road being opened. And I'm sure there's a few that would like to see it open. I'm not disagreeing with that. If you lived on that street for 40 years, it's a peaceful, nice little street there. And so I think that in questioning why we're doing it, Corey indicated there's some rules relative to a dead end in this, as far as should have a turnabout, not a turn or one roundabout, but a wider spot where you can make a U-turn and get out of there. And if you go around this town, as somebody has talked to me about earlier, there's dead ends all over this town, and probably every addition to this town, there's dead ends someplace. And they're all just like this one, with a board going across and some stakes or posts holding those in the ground. And as Darrell mentioned, those have been busted out a couple times since I've lived here, all the years I've lived here. So I think if that would be a situation where it wasn't open, but to meet code or something, we need to make a turnabout there. The two neighbors at that end would maybe consider, I mean, I haven't asked them, so I don't know the answer to this, but they'd have to cut into their yard a little bit to have a turnaround. So my biggest concern is why we're doing this. I mean, it hasn't been open for years. There's a couple people on the far end that want to get out to Saki's quicker or to the Scoop's liquor store. I mean, to me, that's baloney. The fire hall is going to come from the other way, come down Plum Run to our place. And I think all of us that have signed the petition are going to say if it takes the police department or the fire department 30 more seconds to get there, so be it. Then my biggest concern, and it was kind of an eye-opener to me today, a lot of people are talking about the one, and I've been saying when they do this cul-de-sac thing, they could potentially have bike paths going, which would make it easier for people to ride their bikes up and down that street, because I know there's going to be sidewalks and things on the 112 corridor, which I think is, like I said again, a wonderful thing. But if you study the streets in town and you go up on Coventry Road, and you come to my house, right before my house, 30 feet before my house, you cannot see the 112 intersection, okay? And I'm just looking at that one statistic back away. If the speed limit in our streets is 30 feet, that's 300 feet down there. They're coming at 30 feet, we're breaking the law, opening that up. So you're not considering the Coventry Road hill, you're covering that hill over there. I mean the Elmwood Hill by Mound Cemetery, which I'll just go backwards on that one a little bit, but if we start cutting that hill down too much, the road's already steep getting into Mound Cemetery if you're going to cut it down much more. Corey's assured me that middle road maybe wouldn't be cut down too much, but that's the highest part of the road, so maybe that's not going to be taken out. I can't argue that part. But I think you need to look at the considerations here. I've slid into intersections down by the Lutheran Church onto the highway and going too fast, probably in a stormy condition. And I've gone onto Elmwood and just lucky not to get gotten hit by someone. Our street, they come flying over that hill, and everybody can attest that they slam on their brakes because, oh, you see the dead end. But if it's a slippery situation, and maybe things will change if they do open it up, it's the last street in town to get plowed. So, so far, maybe they change that. Everybody talks about what they would do to make it better for all of us, but I think we need to consider, I think it's nobody's talking about people turning on Elmwood onto our street, and if it's a snowy day, they're not gonna get up the hill, are they? We're gonna have to back onto 112 then to get out of there. I mean, I think it's just a safety deal more than anything. It's a luxury for us to have us people that live there, it's a luxury for us to have that street closed. But I think there's a big reason why it's been closed, and I'm not saying what Corey's saying, it may need regulations on the Elmwood side when it's done. But if you go the same elevations on Coventry Road, I think you're gonna have a problem with your numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Colden. Ms. Kenna Sheets, please.
Good evening. My name is Kenna Sheets. I live on 141 Coventry Road. A lot of the topics that I had questions about tonight have been addressed by my neighbors. There are a few more that I would like to address with everybody. Number one, I am the one that went around with my petition. I was told by Jasper that we probably wouldn't make this the July 22nd agenda, so I was considering the August meeting. I have not completed with this petition, but I have brought 8 copies for everybody here to look at. And I'm here to tell you that there is over 50% of the people who reside on Coventry Road, further down my road, and on South Park Lane, and all of the neighbors. They don't want this open. Come on. I'm asking tonight, City Council and everybody, why were we not notified? I was told by Jasper that he would double check his mailing list. I should have received 2 letters and a postcard. I'm still wondering why I was one of the last people to know. And when I went around with this, how come my other neighbors had no clue about this? Somebody failed us. I would have been here a year ago if I would have known this was even part of the discussion. Now, I would also like to say that I contacted MnDOT myself, the engineer there, and I will second what Jasper said. In 1995 was the last study done on our road. The engineer at that time said that it was not a safe intersection and that the line of sight was, I believe he said, 400 feet, and anything less than 600 feet is considered a not safe intersection. I don't know what 1.9 feet out of the hill grade is going to do for our community or for our line of sight. One of the things that has not been addressed is the road grade of Coventry. You will slide into that intersection, folks. I live on top of the hill and I've missed my driveway, probably by going a little too fast thinking I can make it. Slid right in, slid right past, had to back up. My across the street neighbor, her driveway's a little further down. In the middle of the night last winter, she slid right past. She doesn't have 4-wheel drive. I was out there at midnight pushing her back up, making sure she could get in her driveway safely. We have a lot of issues regarding this, and I'm asking the City Council look at this with open eyes and understand what this is going to do for us who bought our houses up there thinking this was going to be a dead-end road for the lifetime. The depreciation that's going to happen to our houses by opening it up to through traffic. Another question of mine that has not been addressed is part of the Highway 112 turnback project. Where is the detoured route? I would like to see that. Is Coventry Road going to be open to detour all traffic while 112 is being worked on throughout the town? I would also like to ask, when the last time was, or where can I find the surveying and what has been done to make sure that this is a safe intersection with the hill grades, the speed, and everything else? There is a couple other options that I would like to talk about. Being I think Darrell Lawrence mentioned it, being a gated community. Would it be more cost effective than taking 1.9 feet out of that hill and building boulder walls to make sure drainage is correct and our hills and everything is good? Why can't we have a gated community? So if our emergency personnel need to get through there, and emergency personnel and the garbage truck who struggles in the wintertime, the snowplow that struggles to get through there, why can't they have Just a little code that opens the gates and they can make it a safe intersection. I'm just asking for some kind of compromise here and options to be looked at that have not been addressed. And also, you know, like I believe my other neighbor, he mentioned something about the budget. Where is all of the price of all of this happening? And does anybody here, can anybody here answer me how long it takes for an empty semi truck pulling a 53-foot reefer? How long is the stopping distance? How long does it take for a car to stop on dry road conditions and on wet road conditions? Many of you may think that a 53-foot reefer loaded 80,000 pounds gross vehicle weight, that to be legal, it's going to take longer for them to stop fully loaded. You're incorrect. It takes longer for a semi to stop when they're empty. I know this because I have a trucking company and I have taken my CDL test and it's right there in the manuals. It will dumbfound you how long it will take them to stop. More than a football field on dry road conditions. So I am just asking you, and somebody said about the surveying, I think it was you, Jasper, talking about the speed survey there. Is it appropriate to have a 30-mile-an-hour zone for Highway 112? We consider it Elmwood, but it is also considered Highway 112. Is it appropriate that it's only 30 miles an hour there? That's why the speed limit is important. That's why that survey should be done. Because if MnDOT rules that it should be a 40-mile-an-hour speed zone, how safe is that intersection to be opened? I would just like City Council and everybody to take a look at this petition and also give me a few. I will submit the final copy, like I said, in August with plenty more. I know for a fact I have well over 60 signatures from a lot of the people in our neighborhood that do not support this. Myself, I do not support it. And I would like to also put the suggestion of, they are called retractable barricades where the personnel can drive over them. They're little, you just screw them into the road and emergency personnel can run over them, but it would detour regular through traffic from coming up the road. I'm just asking for somebody to reconsider and compromise with us and think of the safety of everybody, because this road opening is a hazard to everybody who travels on 112. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sheets.
Did you want these petitions?
Please. Is there anybody else that is not on the sign-up sheet that would like to address City Council regarding the Coventry Road situation?
I just want a couple of points of clarification.
Please come on up to the podium. Identify who you are, please.
I'm Monica Mucko. I live at 154 Coventry. And at one point in my talks with my neighborhood folks, they said they were told by city administration that the speed limit sign was going to be moved farther south on 112. Is it possible to get a point of clarification on that? And then the material that was included in the packet for tonight that talks about Appendix D in the fire code being part of the driving factor for looking to bring this road into compliance as far as a dead-end road. I'm just looking for a point of clarification from someone that could tell us a little bit more about that and why it wasn't a part of tonight's presentation, but rather included in the packet for tonight's meeting. Those are my only questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Henry Kress, I believe you wanted to address the, please come on up.
I just have a brief statement. I came unprepared, but I've lived in Sueur since October of 1972. My wife and I moved into our house on September 15th of 1973. And to my knowledge, Coventry Road has never physically been open. During my 12 years on City Council, this question came up once in that time frame, and it was unanimously defeated. End of discussion.
Anybody else?
I forgot one.
Please come on.
Sorry. I was prepared and then I wasn't. So much. Is fire hydrants. Sorry, I forgot that. I did speak to the fire chief regarding this, and he did tell me in passing, I don't want to do a direct quote, but the way that I understood it is that he did not oppose it necessarily being open, and he would like it to get his 48-foot ladder truck through our street. And I kindly asked him, well, where's the nearest fire hydrant, chief? He said, oh, you have 2 on your road. I said, in my neighborhood? He said, yeah. I said, I don't remember seeing those. South Park Lane is my nearest fire hydrant. It's nearly 800 feet from the nearest house, or the furthest house. So the nearest fire hydrant from the furthest house is 800 feet away. Is new fire hydrants part of your plan as well? Just because there is no way for the fire department to come through up there. We do live in a rural community. If we can't back up our fire trucks, we shouldn't have them.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Olson?
I could have a part of my time, what, please? Can I mention fire? I said that we hadn't had a fire in our neighborhood. No, I didn't. We had a fire in our neighborhood about 2 years ago, Henry?
Yep.
And I talked to the next door neighbor. In fact, the people whose house the fire was at signed the petition. I got them to sign it. Talked to the neighbor next door to the south. He signed it. And he said, when the fire department showed up for that garage fire, a firefighter came to his house and said, where is the nearest hydrant? The nearest hydrant is on the corner of Inner Drive and
South Park Lane.
South Park Lane and Inner Drive. We were told later that that hydrant was not functional. So they then had to go west to Highway 112 to the intersection by the Lutheran Church and attach the hose to that to bring water to put out that garage fire. The nearest hydrant in this area is on the southwest corner of the house that's at the very west end of Coventry on the south side of the street. And it's buried in weeds 3 feet or more deep. And there's a drainage ditch for water runoff that's 3 to 4 feet deep between the roadbed surface and the fire hydrant. And so, since I have a little bit of experience working with fire departments on some of the multi-million-dollar projects I've worked on, I understand that it's typical for a fire department to bring their pumper truck up to the hydrant they intend to attach to, give a couple of firemen a chance to pull off some hose and get their wrenches and get over to the fire hydrant and then start driving toward the fire. So, in order for that to happen, and in order for that to happen using the closest hydrant to a fire in any of those 4 houses there, the fire truck would have had to gone south on 112, over the hill, turned around, come back, found that hydrant, started their practice of laying the hose line to get down to the corner that now is being suggested we complete, make a very right hard turn, and then deliver hose up to the point where it can be used to put out the fire. That to me seems a really ridiculous way to bring a hose to a fire. And as Kenna mentioned, the nearest hose that is in a logical path to get to the fire is the corner of Coventry and Park Lane, which is, I think you said 900 feet?
It's 800, just below 800 feet.
From that point of view, I find it disappointing that we don't know more about the implications of the fire department, and we don't have anybody here to answer questions. And we have a lot of people who we talk to who are willing to say they're not impressed. I myself went out and got about 25 of the signatures for this, and I covered Coventry from Park Lane all the way up to the east end. I had 3 people who weren't home. I had one person that said No. And the rest of the people on Coventry said yes. I then got some more signatures from Woodcrest Terrace, the street that I lived on. So, if you say, I got 25 signatures, a pessimist would say, so what? If I would say I got 80% or 90% of the people I talked to sign it, someone would say, so what? If I said I covered every house on that street for 3 blocks, and one person said no, and all the other houses said, yes, we want it closed, that's meaningful, relevant data. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Once again, anybody else from the audience that would like to address City Council? I'll entertain a motion to go ahead and close the public comments portion for 7 Alpha, the Coventry Road discussion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's carried. I'd like to get our city engineer to come on up to the podium, please, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council.
I guess if you could just maybe give us a synopsis in regards to what's going on from an engineering point of view, and maybe address some of the issues that we've heard that might have anything to do with an engineering perspective.
Yeah, I'd gladly do that. So the background is, obviously, as we discussed in the past, there's a turn back happening on 112 Elmwood Avenue. And this project's been ongoing for about 2 years' time now. Throughout that process, we've had various open houses, 2 in fact, and then a kind of a southern business-focused meeting. And one admittance that I will have is the correspondence for those open houses has been through mailing and social media, but the mailing has been focused on properties adjacent to 112. So that is one admittance that Coventry Road was not notified specifically as the corridor of 112 itself. So that part of it was an oversight. That being said, we are at a position of the design where nothing is final, nothing's decided, and so timing and discussion has been very good and positive tonight, but that is correct, that we did not mail out Coventry. 112 itself is going through a pretty substantial change. I mean, it's a rural road today, narrow lane widths, no real shoulder to speak of, and the improvement of 112 is going to be substantial in the sense that we're urbanizing. We're bringing curb and gutter in all the way from Slack Drive, really the end of the industrial area there, all the way up Elmwood then to Ferry. So it'll be urbanized, we're adding shoulders. With that is a wider footprint of roadway. And one of the provisions that you have when you widen the roadway substantially relative to 112 being rural with ditches is that it's a constant balance of additional road width and then what's the impact of that widening grading. And one of the things that you commonly see when you urbanize and you widen is you end up lowering profile. And that's the sizable change here that's happening with 112 and relative to Coventry is that, yes, the profile today does not meet sightline distance for an opening of Coventry. That's been pretty well recorded and something that we validated in our review. But because of the improvements, we are able to make a change on 112. And I think I'd speak to that regardless of whether Coventry is open or not, you would see a profile change on 112 either way. And it's really primarily to balance that widening and that fill. If you match profile today and just widen, you have some pretty tremendous fill slopes. If you have a lower profile and still widen, you have impact, but it's less. And so one of the things we noted with Coventry very early on is it wasn't open, it was closed. And obviously validation of that was due to Sidelines. And through review of our design, we've been able to confirm or substantiate that we're able to achieve now an engineering standard for sightlines. One of the things noted in the figure, there's really 2 primary guidances for sightlines. There's a MnDOT road design manual, and then there's a national, an AASHTO. The MnDOT road design manual is more stringent, is more restrictive, but in that figure noted, we are meeting the 30-mile-an-hour sightline for the MnDOT road design manual. And we're far exceeding what the national guideline would be. Understanding speed's a consideration here on Elmwood. We've further looked at that relative to speeds greater than 30. It is posted 30, it's going to stay 30. To address the question about the speed changes, The road is now under county jurisdiction. Jasper's right, for state and county roads, MnDOT governs speed. And for this 112 project, there's no planned change in speed. So all the speed zones that you see today and the signing you see today is proposed to remain consistent. So that speed limit of 30 mile an hour would hold about at the top of the hill by the cemetery. Daryl's correct, we're not proposing any grade changes until the middle north end of the cemetery. So that middle drive has been deemed very, very important, and there's no grade change proposed there. It's really between the two driveways where we start to make the grade change, through Caucus and then down into Coventry. One of the things to note, Coventry at the intersection won't have a substantial grade change. Just being able to make that connection, understanding the grade on Coventry is a concern. To put a number to it, you're looking at less than 5% today on Coventry Road. So that certainly isn't flat, I'm aware, but well within guidelines for what a local street would be. Certainly well below some of the streets that we have in town otherwise. I mean, Bridge Street's on 112, we're looking at a grade in excess of 12% on Bridge. And I'm very well aware that's not a stop condition, but everything that we have available to us, 5% is an excessive grade. So just to speak to that, but going back, the way that we, as far as an engineering standpoint, looking at site distance, looking at the intersection, stock controlled, and provided in my memo from an engineering standpoint, is our interpretation, our recommendation that it is able to be open per the provisions of an intersection site design. So hopefully I addressed most everything. And then I guess the only last thing I want to make comment on is this is a sizable project. It's a pretty impactful project for the city of Sueur. There's a lot to absorb and manage through the process. It's the entirety of the city limits, essentially, over 3 miles of project. And so there's been a lot of things that are going on. And, to speak to the opening of Coventry, it was always the intent to open Coventry. That was really from very early on. Whether that was always, the focus of discussion or on the front end and always addressed through that process, I guess that part I can't recall or speak to. But, as I visited with Daryl, there wasn't meant to be any flip-flopping in relative to Coventry. Certainly no detailed, in-depth discussion like we're having tonight, but it was never intended to be. It was closed, open. So hopefully through documents and things that we've had, presentable on the website and stuff, that one would be able to verify that. But I can speak to that. At least as a project team, we haven't flip-flopped to this point. So.
Is there anybody on city council that has any questions for our city engineer?
I have a question.
Please.
Currently, the speed limit is reduced to 30, somewhere up near interstate lumber or whatever it is up there. Where does it go down to 30?
Yeah, LaBelle's.
LaBelle's, that's a good marker.
For northbound, yep.
Is it possible to have that 30 mile an hour speed limit start at 115?
To speak to possibility, I would say there's always a possibility. The likelihood is low. The likelihood, I believe, is low. It's 55 at 115. That's a through stop intersection.
It's 50 right after you cross.
Yep, it's 50 right after you cross. So I would say, given the characteristic of 112, certainly that southern industrial, I'll call it, I don't believe you would have a speed that would warrant 30 mile an hour there. I don't believe you would ever have a speed study that would recommend 30 mile an hour. Is 50 the right speed? I think it's close. You most commonly see a 45 maybe in an area like 112 on north of 115. So just, answer your question. I think a speed change or a speed study is well warranted, but it is my professional opinion you will not get a recommendation for 30 that far out of town. And then to speak to 30 on a County State 8 highway, understanding 112 was a trunk highway, it's now going to be a County State 8 highway. I'm nearly 100% confident you're not going to see a speed less than 30 either. Where the zone limits are, I can't speak to that again in any definitivity, but you will not see a signage less than 30 on Elmwood.
Councilmember Felonies?
Okay, you said that far out of town, and technically that's not out of town, that is
Correct.
still city limits.
It is.
And how far back are they planning on pushing the 30 mile an hour? Do you know?
So that was a miscommunication, misunderstanding. We're not changing 112 as it lies today with that project. The speed limit zones are not changing. They're not changing.
So we were told that we were looking at it dropping down to 45, which it's not going to happen, and it's not being pushed back further south.
That is correct. Neither of those two things are at this time a part of the 112 project.
However, we could ask the county to do that, correct?
Yep, yeah, it'd actually be through MnDOT. It'd be the local district traffic that would do the speed study, that would do the analysis, and then pending those results, then that's the process that Jasper spoke to. For state highways and county highways, it's a process through MnDOT, the speed study, that analyzes and recommends the speed limits.
Okay, let me simply state,
Sure.
and I'm not making any decisions. I'm delighted to, and that's not the right word, I'm pleased to hear all the opinions. We need to do that. Whether we open Coventry or not, this issue of the speed limit has come before us, much as the fire hydrant issue has come before us. But I want to move to one other thing. The proposed sidewalk extension from Turtle Street, going up toward the airport, what side of the road is that going to be on?
So as far as sidewalk goes, there's planned to be sidewalk from Ferry to the north driveway of the cemetery on the west side. There'll be added sidewalk 5 foot wide from Ferry to the north driveway of the cemetery. That's west side of 112. On the east side of 112, there's proposed to be an 8-foot trail from Ferry to 115. And that's the entirety of the
where
east side.
Coventry Road comes out into 112, current 112. This is always fun because we're talking about a road's going to change its number, but we'll stick with 112.
Yeah.
So this would be, there'd be an 8-foot recreational lane right at that exit.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You said the trail would be on the east side of.
Correct.
Anybody else have anything?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Corey, has there been any conversation about if this was to open as to what could potentially be done with the Coventry with the sloping there? But just driving it today, I went up and looked at it today because that was a concern that I had heard. And when you're driving towards 112 on Coventry, there is quite a loss of vision moving forward, and then you come over the hill and you're literally right there.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have to agree that there's literally no sight there until you get over that hill. So I would be concerned with that as a safety issue. From just my own opinion, that's why I'm curious if there's anything that can be done up in that neighborhood if this was to move forward.
So to address the first comment, I guess, about grade, besides, there's really two ways to better grade. It's you either lower the, raise the low end or you decrease the high end. In regards to Coventry and the scope of the project, we're planning to have all the improvement be from the last driveway west. So basically the last driveway west into 112. Based on that, as far as a gradient standpoint, we're not planning to modify Coventry from a grade. That last 75 feet, say, we'll have some slight variation, slightly steeper to accommodate the pedestrian crossing there at the trail. But we're talking from a 4.8 to a 5.1, so not a tremendous increase in grade. To adjust Coventry then further east, that's a sizable impact. It's likely bringing that hill down and the impacts of, the driveways and all the properties with that. That's not a part of this project. Speaking to the grade on Coventry, kind of to a point I made earlier, it's aware that it's not flat, but I think on the terms, at least from an engineering standpoint, it's not excessively steep either. Put it in perspective, running grade for sidewalk for ADA accessibility is 5% or less. That's kind of your target for sidewalk, and we're talking about a road that's 5% or less. So, is there concern in Minnesota for dry conditions? Stopping at intersections, absolutely, and that's where maintenance and timely maintenance becomes a factor. It's been indicated that Coventry's the last road to be maintained. I think some of that reasoning is because of the dead end nature and its inability or its inconvenience to access. An intersection onto a county stated highway you hope that you'd be drastically improving that. You know, so that's always a factor in design. Though there's some grade in the Sueur, you know, and I wouldn't say Coventry is the steepest grade or excessive from an engineering standpoint. So,
Thank you.
I hope that answers your question.
Corey, I wonder whether or not you might be able to discuss a little bit about one of the ideas that Mr. Lawrence had brought up regarding the electronic gate or coded card gate type of system. Is from your engineering perspective, is that something that could be potentially done?
I think, you know, just speaking from the standpoint of feasibility, certainly, you know, there's always a way. You know, you know, really the discussion, I guess, of Coventry is, you know, anytime you look at a sizable project like this, you look at, you know, inconsistencies or atypical situations. And a dead-end road in the nature of Coventry, the barricading isn't to standard that you normally see. I'd argue that, you know, the connection, you can almost visibly see it is pretty minimally removed. Almost looks like the egg base is still there, the ditch isn't cut through. So it's just something that you naturally want to look into further. And just understanding that the reasons for its non-opening are related to safety. We have a betterment, you know, we're able to gain safety for an intersection. That's really where we're at from an engineering standpoint. So, you know, if there's provisions and reasons, you know, why not to open, but maybe accommodate some of these emergency services, I think you could certainly get to a conclusion like that. In my experience, or what I would typically see, I would say, I can't speak to another condition similar to that. I'm certainly familiar with homeowner association, you know, neighborhoods that are private, you know, maybe it's a local road system, and obviously they have some gating and stuff. Well aware that exists in the world. I've never seen that application onto a city right away, a city public street such as Coventry. So, but is there a way to do so? I'm certain there is, should that decision be settled upon.
We have a question from the audience.
Yes, I have a really quick question. Is it possible to put a turning lane coming from 112 into Coventry and a similar turning lane from Coventry onto 112 to give some sort of a buffer for the traffic coming down 112? Because I think that's the primary concern here is the traffic issue, the speed issue.
So are you suggesting eliminating a left-hand turn to go out of town from Coventry? You're just saying allowing
Just turn lanes from 112. So if you try, you could merge in.
Okay, I wasn't understanding what you were saying.
Yeah, just to make the intersection, if it does go through, to make the intersection a little bit safer, that traffic coming from 112 onto Coventry has a turning lane so that they can safely slow down.
Okay.
That's nice, but Joanne will still be backing oncoming traffic with a turn lane regardless, but that's not what I was talking about. The other thing is a reboundable delineator is what the word is. And that was suggested by MnDOT today when I spoke to them, is putting in some kind of system like that rather than the gated access. Reboundable delineators. Emergency personnel can run over them without any harm.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that has anything at all for our city engineer?
I'd be on the side with that 8-foot sidewalk. I wasn't aware that it went back to 8 foot. Who's supposed to maintain that?
City Administrator Quinlan?
It's good you bring that up because they're actually talking about our sidewalk and snow removal policy tonight. That 8-foot sidewalk would be maintained by the city. Along with the adjacent, what we're proposing to City Council is that if there's a sidewalk adjacent to a trail, the city would also maintain that as well as far as snow removal goes.
Can I ask the engineer a question that everybody
Sure.
else?
Go ahead, Mr. Coleman.
Could we what would be the ramifications if the decision to open Coventry was tabled to have a turnaround there, widen, cut into the yards a little bit at the end, so there would be a turnaround? You know, you and I visited one, that's just a possibility, I'm just asking that question. I mean, we're not talking about doing it all over town, obviously, but I mean, we've got dead ends all over town. But just that's the question I've got, would that be I mean, there's some rules about dead ends is what I got the impression from you.
There is,
Yeah.
yeah. So, yes, first of all, I'll speak to the timing, and I think it's an important point. There's some discussion of cost. So the recommended design of 112, I believe, is going to hold either way. We're not final design yet to the point where we're actually going out and bidding the project. We're at 60% to put in time frame, but 112's profile, I think, is going to hold either way, regardless of decision on Coventry. It's allowing an opportunity at Coventry. So the cost to connect Coventry is a part of the 112 project, and it's a I guess an outcome of the 112 project, and the cost is relatively low. We're talking about 50 feet of curb and gutter and pavement. So a cost to overall project is low. There's a substantial project cost, but there's a substantial improvement taking place too. So cost is really a non-factor here relative to Coventry. As far as timing, we're identifying 2020, 2021 as the construction for 112. We're not 100% certain yet on what the staging is going to be. It's a sizable project, and we have a lot to work through relative to that. Not only including that there's a southern portion, rural portion of 112 under construction right now, and that carries into 2022. So there'll be further discussion on staging. There is no intent to make Coventry a detour. That's not an avenue for this project. So it's a long-term impact. There's a comment made there. Detours of a county road, we would look to avoid city streets, most certainly. Timing-wise, speaking to that, then I think Coventry, not only in project time, we're looking at bidding here in February. We have some time to make this decision, but timing of connection could really be very flexible. 112 is going to be there. It's going to be, basically in the design that we're proposing, and if that decision is made after the project, as maybe Daryl's alluding to, I think there's an avenue and opportunity for that. Speaking of the turnaround, there's a lot of guidance when it comes to turnaround, a lot of different styles of turnarounds. But the general recommendation is for dead-end streets that you have some sort of turnaround provision, if not connected. And so to speak to the right-of-way of Coventry, I'm pretty confident you couldn't make a standard turnaround in the existing right-of-way today. So you'd be looking at some sort of acquisition or some sort of substandard turnaround. Don't get me wrong, a substandard turnaround is better than no turnaround, but to be able to say that you can make a standard turnaround and not impact the right-of-way, those corner properties, I don't believe that to be the case.
Ma'am.
Can I just ask one question? You said that if the decision didn't come before the looking to get bids or quotes in February, and not included as part of the 112 project, would the cost then be borne by the adjacent property owners as an assessment? Or I know the assessment policy is being considered tonight too, but if it comes outside of the project timeline, is it then going to have to be looked at by this board or this, local government to somehow fund that renovation?
Yeah,
Because to me, full disclosure, I think that could influence, how quickly we want this board to make a decision about this.
That's a city administrator question, so I'm gonna have Jasper go ahead and address that.
Yeah, so I think what you're talking about is if we postpone any opening of Coventry and it becomes a city project, more so than a county project, right?
Yeah, if it's outside of the scope of this project.
Yeah. So either way, under either condition, the city council would have the ability to assess if there's a benefit defined to those project or to those properties. At this time, we're not. We haven't discussed this, and this would be something in city council if the special assessment policy is passed. But at this time, I don't think that we're proposing any sort of special assessments for Coventry Road. If this is a city project completely separate of this county project, that option would be on the table for city council to decide.
Mrs. Lawrence.
If you're putting in the sidewalk and a bike trail there, which is not there currently, a sidewalk or a bike trail, and you're opening Coventry Road, isn't that endangering even more people's lives? Opening Coventry Road?
As far as, are you speaking to the crossing there, you mean? Or?
Yeah, like if you open Coventry Road.
Yep.
Right now, there currently isn't a bike trail or a sidewalk. And you're putting those in, and then you're opening Coventry Road, well, that's even more people that could be endangered.
Yeah, you're very correct in the standpoint that there's an interaction that doesn't exist today, a pedestrian vehicle interaction, but crossings at intersections are always preferred. Certainly a crossing at a stop condition that Coventry would be, that is within that's what we aim for as far as recommendations for crossings. So absolutely there's more interaction that's going to be taking place in the existing condition, but from the standpoint of justified or engineering standard, that's well in line with what you would aim for. So not one bit negating the risk, but that's part of urban design when you're accommodating more than just a vehicle user. So, Mr.
Olson,
I'm a bit confused. The sidewalk is going to go down the west side of 112 from Ferry Street to, where did you say?
The North Cemetery driveway.
North Cemetery driveway, which is on top of the hill.
Correct.
Okay, and then it's going to cross 112 to the south side of 112, and then it's going to continue down south on the east side of 112, right? So we'll have bicycle and pedestrian traffic crossing on the peak of the hill.
Only correction is there's a continuous bike trail on the east side from Ferry to 115.
Why do we need a bike trail to go out to 115?
If
Or
I could
sidewalk.
If I could please. So 112 from Ferry Street south is going to have a sidewalk on both the east and the west side?
Have a sidewalk on the west side and a trail on the east side for a portion.
Okay, and then we're gonna get to the top of the hill at the cemetery, and then the pedestrian traffic is gonna cross the street to join the bike traffic and be on the east side of 112 as it heads south. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
If there'll be a crossing at Cactus Drive, yeah.
Then I need to ask the question, when you refer to the state highway design standards and the federal highway design standards and the fact that you're, as official engineering representative of the city, following the state highway design standards, what do those standards say about a pedestrian and a bicycle path crossing a highway? Has that point been taken into account in the total consideration of whether to put the connection between 112 and Coventry into place? It seems to me, for those of us who live there for 40 years plus and have bothered to dig into it, there's enough hazard already. Now I see an additional hazard for children and people riding their bikes being introduced, and I question you and your engineering staff to say, when you analyzed what you were going to do for Coventry, did you also take into account the bike path and the walking path at the top of the hill? Or were they taken at separate times and never merged into one thought?
City Administrator Kruger.
I think I understand what you're asking, Mr. Olson, and it's not the design. So you're saying that there's going to be a mid-block crossing of pedestrians.
I didn't say mid-block.
Well, a non-intersection crossing at the north entrance of Mount Cemetery. That's not the case. The case is we'll direct pedestrians to cross if they choose at Turl, so at a controlled intersection.
So then why does it need to go all the way to the north end of the cemetery?
So it's part of our Parks and Open Space Trail System plan. So it's thinking about our trail system into the future, getting us out there for future state trails.
If I may, City Administrator, Council, Mr. Mayor. So one of the acknowledgments with the pedestrian facilities that we're proposing on 112 is actually an improvement. It's a accommodation for those users. 112 today is 2 12-foot lanes, no shoulder provisions, rural ditches on each side. So a connectivity for somebody other than a motorist is really non-existent today. So the impact of adding a sidewalk and a trail is actually promoting and bettering that accessibility for those users. Crossings at intersections are an inherent outcome of that, or result of that in an urban section. To answer the question of Coventry and pedestrian design, those are very unrelated. Coventry is a whole separate issue. That's an intersection motorist decision. The trails proposed to go through Coventry, whether it's open and closed, and to be honest with you, it's feasible to go through whether it's open and closed. Crossings at intersections aren't atypical. This is a 30-mile-an-hour going to be urban environment, so that's very standard to what you even see on Ferry today. You've got crossings at 4th and 5th, 6. So I would say, yes, there is risk there, but we feel with this improvement, providing facility that's separated from the roadway itself for those users, having pedestrian crossings with ADA compliant ped ramps at intersections, that's about as safe a design as we can propose from an engineering standpoint.
I understand everything you said, and I agree with 99% of it. I want to take the hypothetical case where a person is going westbound on Coventry and the connection is made to 112. They stop. They look to the left, which the law says you're going to, and they want to make a left turn. The law says you look to the left first, then you look to the right, then you look to the left, and if you still have clearance, you proceed with making your left turn, and the chief of police isn't here to tell me if I'm right or wrong, thank goodness. But, assuming that I'm right, would that person in that vehicle be able to see people using that crosswalk up by the cemetery, or would the ultimate grade prevent them from seeing them? And as they accelerate into the intersection and up the hill, is there enough time for them to brake and slow down if there are people in that intersection?
The answer is yes.
I would like to see the numbers, please.
Yeah, I'd love to share figures.
I will talk to you about that. Thank you.
Mr. Golden?
I guess I'd like to get back to Coventry Road. I don't know when the final plans for this are going to be done, but I mean, there's a lot of issues relative to the walkway and the driveways and all that. But I guess I'd like, if you could go back to that slide on the speed and the distance deal. I think we're missing something, and Mr. Sullivan brought it up earlier, with the yardage needed back, I think, before this even. That 300 feet deal, 400 this deal here. I think here's where I see the biggest problem that hasn't been addressed, and nobody's asked the engineering group to talk about it. But if our speed limit, I don't know if the city streets are 30 miles an hour or not on our city streets, but we are not within that 400-foot distance for stopping at a controlled stop. From my house down, there are I think they're 125 yards or feet lots. That's 375 feet. You're at 400, and it's downhill. I mean, I think you've got a real problem here. If this makes any difference at all, you're telling me right there it's not safe to do it. Because we're at 375, you can't see the hill down there. So unless you put a bunch of blinking lights or something up there, I mean, I think this answers your whole question right here as far as what you can't do. Because you can't lower that hill at all. My driveway would be like this. It's already steep. I mean, I think we've probably got everything pretty well covered, but I don't want you to forget this right here. Because I think everybody agrees the corridor thing is a wonderful plan. I don't think there's anybody that, maybe they don't like losing their trees and all these kinds of things. There's issues there, but I mean, that's just progress. But I mean, this is a situation where I think you're looking for an accident because you're not playing within the guidelines you're showing me. Thank you.
I'll kick it off to Corey. He's got an answer. We haven't really looked at that as far as
that's what I'm saying.
Goes, and we can.
If you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, Council, I'm well prepared for this meeting. I understand there's going to be some discussion here tonight. So one of the important distinctions to note is when you're referencing these required site distances, there's two displacement points when you're at a minor road intersection entering a major. It's the left-hand turn and it's the right-hand turn. And so per engineering standard, the site distances for those two maneuvers are actually exceeding the site distance or the stopping site distance necessary to come to a complete stop from the speed travel that's posted. So these decision triangles are for those two maneuvers. The stopping site distance for a 30 mile an hour is actually closer to a 300-foot distance. So it's the understanding that your roadway design in your major road is already accommodating a stopping site. At intersections, you have additional provision for these intersection site distances. So there is some justification in that. Looking at Coventry, while it's close, I believe that the grade in the crest of the curve at Coventry, as Daryl's acknowledging, just allows you the provision for a stopping site distance coming down Coventry. While not ideal, obviously the grade and the crest curve, there's actually kind of a compound crest there. I believe it's sufficient enough where we are still recommending to move, or, we believe it's safe to move forward with the opening. So don't mean to have, sound as if I have all the answers, but we have thoroughly analyzed this.
Is that considering snow and ice on these numbers?
Well, I think that if you look at the traffic laws, that 30 mile an hour is under optimal road conditions. You're required by law to be traveling at a speed safe for the for the conditions that you're driving in. So snow and ice, obviously 30 miles an hour is too fast. And the chief of police is here, correct me if I'm wrong.
Please, Councilmember Fablis.
As it's a city council discussion as well. You've made the reference now several times to modern urban design, that this is a modern urban design with the sidewalk and the path, the bike path, which is connectivity, and I get with all of that. But I'm trying to connect the idea that modern urban design works with 40 and 50 mile an hour speeds. Now, if you've got people that are going to go from, hey, you know what, we have the airport that's there, we're trying to bring people to the airport, we've had a number of the Lions Club has a fly-in, and we just had a fly-in. You want to bring people from the neighborhoods to be able to go up to the airport to see these things. And if we're going to walk up that path and have to go across the street, it's 50 miles an hour. That, to me, doesn't meet what a modern urban design is. We have a path there. That's part of this design. That means that the people, technically, the businesses that are on that side of the street, where that is, get premium business from people that are walking or going with bicycles and skateboards and whatnot. But across the street from that, it's 50 miles an hour. So those don't get those benefits, or whatever would go in there in the future. If we're talking about future and future design and growth and what, those businesses aren't always going to stay those businesses. We've seen turnovers in those businesses up there. I've got a piece of property there that I'm like the fourth or fifth owner in that property up there. I have a hard time with the concept of modern urban design when it doesn't seem to fit that bill. I think about the sidewalks and the trails and the things that we have up on Kingsway, and what's on Kingsway. And Kingsway was designed to be able to have large trucks and stuff going through there, and yet that's still, 30 miles an hour, right? Okay, well, we have the sidewalk and the path and all the things going over there across the street. We've now got the dog park, you've got connectivity to the schools. We're not sitting at 40 and 50 miles an hour there. I live right off of this road. These trucks go too fast. And if we can't be asking, in fact, we should be asking MnDOT or the county, start that 30 miles an hour back to 115. If we're truly calling this modern urban design, then we've got to make it safe for all. And one of the things that's been stated over and over again now, because we've asked about this, is liabilities. And the liabilities continue to come back to the liabilities of making the changes on 112 with the grade and the safety of the turn. But the liabilities haven't been addressed with not making the change. Okay? In my line of work, in my world, I have two things that govern what we do. One is ADA, the American Disability Act, and the other is ASTM and EN 975. Those are safety requirements, but those are the requirements, or those are the recommendations from all manufacturers for all kinds of different things, from automobiles to fitness equipment to you name it, how your furnace is supposed to be placed. If you don't those are recommended. They're not law, or ADA is law run by the Department of Justice. If you choose not to follow the ASTM and EN 975 recommendations, hey, you can choose not to. But the very first time that there is an incident, and I know this because I've been involved in it, the very first time that there's an incident, you're going to be the one holding the court for it. My question with this is if city staff is making beliefs that this should be opened up, the police department is saying that it should be opened up. They feel that it should be. The fire department is saying that it should be. We have a 2015 fire code that says that it should be, which, by the way, we're holding every homeowner that's here that gets a permit to do the work on their house is held up to that fire code that we haven't really even adopted yet. But we're not going to do that on these roads, on this road, or on any on the other roads. We're looking to do that, but right now we're saying that that's spotted. Not, we can opt out to that. Here's my fear and my concern with this. If city council decides not to, or we vote, don't open that, and Gerald sells his home to somebody else, or Lyle, or my father, or anybody sells their home to somebody else, if there's a fire and the truck can't turn around, or if time is the major issue, or any one of these things happen, and there's a loss of life, the liability, what is the liability? Are we liable? Is the city actually liable for not following all of the recommendations? That's my concern with this. I bought a house on a cul-de-sac. I like the peacefulness aspect. I like my neighbors. I like who we butt up against and everything. Do I want any of that to change? No. But this is one of those things that it was designed specifically to be brought through. I'm worried about what happens if we don't follow the recommendations. What's the liability?
City Attorney Skubitz?
Yeah, the liability issue, the city's not, even if it gets named as a defendant in the litigation. One, I think it'd be a rare instance. You're looking at a response time, let's say for fire, it's coming from Kingsway to Plum Run, down Coventry, typically. There's definitely an inconvenience there where a big truck is not going to turn around. Probably going to have to back out from a response down that road. But I don't see the city being named in the lawsuit, and clearly the city council would have indemnification from any lawsuit if it was not passed. As I put in my memo, there are, obviously we did receive input from both city engineer indicating that it would indicate compliance. So if the council decided to open up, it would be in compliance. Even if it would go without saying, would an accident occur at this intersection? Probably. Accidents occur at intersections all the time. There hasn't been one because the intersection's been closed. But just as an intersection would occur at Inner and Elmwood, an accident would occur at Coventry and Elmwood, without a doubt. The city does not have a liability for that as long as it's an approved, regulated, MnDOT sanctioned road. Accidents, liability happen by negligence of others. People driving too fast, running a stop sign, not keeping a proper lookout. The law determines the fault in that in litigation or whatnot. The comparative fault statute that we have in Minnesota for negligence, but the city could not be brought in as a litigant, as a defendant, if someone was someone did name the city as a defendant in a suit saying that this was an unsafe intersection. We would show the engineering studies to say it wasn't, and we'd be dismissed right away. So there's not a liability aspect. It's really kind of a safety issue for the council, in my mind, to determine, is this the best avenue to open this up, or to listen to the first responders and create a proper turnaround if it's closed. Liability-wise, I'm not concerned, as Jasper's talked about, dealing with legalness of city's insurance. I'm not worried about liability on the city's behalf. It's a question where right now, with the change of circumstances on the Highway 112 project, it allows the open discussion. Is this a feasible thing to do, to reopen it as an access point into the neighborhood as it was designed? And that's something that I'm sure the council will consider. I would urge them that liability should not be a paramount issue in the discussion over this. There's ways, whether we open it or keep it closed, that liability will be avoided.
Councilmember Fablis, do you have a follow-up on that? Ms. Sheets?
Yeah, quick question. Where are you, Johnny, are you getting that information of a 2015 fire code that we are not complying with? After speaking to the state fire marshal, they are not retroactive codes. We are up to code, up to the 1975 standards when the development was established.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there is a 2015 code, and we are currently using that code in the building code. This section that has to do with the streets, okay, it is considered voluntary, okay? At this point, it's considered voluntary. My basis to this is that we're using a code for one thing, not using it for the other, and in a liability situation, if there is a problem with not opening it, okay? If there was a loss of life or a problem, that would happen, and we didn't follow these things, what would the liabilities to the city be? Not if it's open. If it's open, it doesn't sound like the liability issue is an issue because it follows what MnDOT and the engineering says is correct for the sightline views. That actually falls on an engineering situation, but the decision is on city council for whether or not we open it up or leave it closed.
So you're not talking specific to the fire department, then? Maybe I misunderstood.
No, but there are things to the fire. Okay, so we're building new housing developments in town. All right, these things happen. Well, are we going to be building those so that we have the correct access and so that we can have turnaround, so that those neighborhoods are safe? Well, that's exactly what they're doing, okay? In this case, the things that were a problem with Coventry and 112 are actually being corrected per the engineer. I'm not an engineer, okay? But per the engineer, per the state, per the fire department, per the police department, with that fixed, it's a decision as to why we would not open that up. It's hard to make a decision with, this is my home and this is how it's always been. We know that it was created to go all the way through. It was made that way. And so was Caucus. Caucus is made to be able to go all, in fact, Caucus and Coventry were built at the same time. Caucus is made to come down and actually have connectivity onto Coventry. That's right. The whole thing is supposed to, it's part of that. The concern comes down to what it would be if we didn't vote. We actually would have to vote to not open it. It's not about voting to open it. For city council, it's a vote to not open it. And people sell their houses. People move. When they do, other people might like that connectivity. Keep in mind that it's your choice. It's everybody here. It's their choice. I go to visit my parents. I visit friends that are in the neighborhood. I've got plenty of friends that live out there. I have a choice whether or not I'm going to use Coventry or I'm going to use, can't remember what the other Inner Drive. I think about connectivity, and I have an entire neighborhood out there, all the way out there, and there's not a single park. You have to cross over where the high school is, or on 112 to get to a park. I think about connectivity and the idea that we're putting in bike paths as a good thing to be able to get across the, across town. It's just a matter of trying to see what's
I guess
What's
I just
right in our eyes?
misunderstood you when you referenced 2015 fire code and where the liability was, because it is not applicable to us currently where we sit, and it wouldn't, the only time it would be applicable to us is if our development wasn't there and new houses were being built. That would be the only time that the state fire marshal code would need to be put into place. So I guess I misunderstood what you were asking. I thought you were saying that we were in violation of fire code as of 2015. even though the state hasn't adopted it.
I'm just saying that we're in a position where if we're making a change and that no longer, that's no longer an issue, so for the sight line, and what do we do from here?
Is there any other questions associated with engineering?
So I started out with the meeting and said, you guys don't live there, we live there.
You have to come to the mic so we can understand and we can get it on record.
Now, so I started out with the meeting and said that we live there, and one of my big concerns, and Daryl's brought it up too, was that hill, and so I've been there for 20 years. I can't tell you how many people in the winter that I've pulled back up because they come over that hill too fast, and we keep saying that they're gonna slide right through that intersection. And so then I hear that they can't back the fire truck up. So you brought up, so why isn't Caucus in Park Lane, why isn't that hooked up?
That's exactly right.
No, why isn't that one hooked up? Because now you got, so the ambulance, the fire truck, the police, they all gotta drive down there and they all gotta back out. So we're
They can
wondering.
turn around, some can.
Well, they can turn around down in ours.
Yeah, they can at that point, they don't have to back out. Why would you say that? The ambulance can come down and turn around. And the only, but giant fire trucks, the only problem. And I guess I don't see this as being a big deal as far as the ambulance and the police. But the fire truck, if they drive in there and do their job and then the fire's out, they have to back out, is that a big deal?
It's a rural community.
Well, we've told them to try these, whatever, electric gates or whatever, different options. So I think that takes your liability thing out of it, because now we've given the option to go out for them.
I think the petition kind of speaks for itself. People are saying, we don't care if it's open. They know it's gonna take the police a little longer, the fire department or the ambulance to get there a little longer, maybe. I guess everybody's growing up around this room. And those that live there are willing to go take that chance, if you will, and they're not gonna sue the city. If the fire truck gets there 30 seconds later, it's not gonna make an awful lot of difference, and they're probably not gonna come down to Elmwood either way.
Mr. Olson?
The one point that's been alluded to, I think, that hasn't really been said specifically is, if the connection is made, will Coventry stay a residential street, or will it become an arterial street like 4th Street, like Bridge Street, like Ferry Street, with a significant amount of commercial truck traffic because it becomes the pseudo bypass for the downtown? And your predecessors for 30, 40 years or more, at one time or another, have said, we really need to have a bypass around town. And it's run the gamut of a whole bunch of different things, and I'm not going to take your time to talk about it. But I've noticed that almost all of the milk delivery trucks go on the bypass around town. They don't come through downtown anymore. Would that kind of scenario and mentality and quiet encouragement from the city turn what's two perfectly nice residential communities into major commercial traffic streets?
Mr. Mayor, may I?
Please.
Let me start by saying how much I think all of us appreciate the input of the community and the professionals the city staff. It strikes me, as much as I don't like putting things off, that we simply need more information. And in that regard, I'm going to ultimately propose that we close this discussion and defer it to a future meeting, not specifying which meeting, by the way, because we may need more time. We've got issues such as these: the slope of Coventry, electronic gates, cul-de-sac turnaround. Forgive me, I can't remember the first word, but the second word is delineator. We'll pick it up later.
Reboundable.
We have the issue of the speed limit and can it be reduced. I think we need to try to find out, regardless of what happens with this Coventry issue, 112, currently named, if we can get that thing reduced to 30 starting at 115, we have served the safety of the community, of the businesses, of everybody out there. So that's something to explore. I'd add another possibility. Maybe it should be a right in, right out. Well, some people are going to complain about that, but a right in, right out from Coventry onto 112. You could make it so that emergency vehicles could still turn left if they needed to, coming from town, from the downtown area. So all these kind of issues that have been raised, I think we need to continue to explore. The electronic gate idea. All those ideas, we need to have more information so that we can properly address this. And I think we need staff to have time to digest this, and all of us. So with that in mind, if I may, I would move that we defer further discussion until a future meeting.
Well, I would like to go ahead and bring up our police chief in regards to the emergency services portion first, just so we can go ahead and get some of the citizens' issues relative to the speed and also the fire hydrant situation that was brought to our attention tonight. So, Chief Kelly, sir?
Mayor, City Council, I have no idea where the fire hydrants are.
We told you. It's all
And
our
I'm
place.
glad I don't. All right. Obviously, I support the opening of the roadway, and that's based on my personal experience in emergencies. There have been fires in that neighborhood, and there have been medicals, plenty of medicals in that neighborhood. I've had the opportunity to be right at Coventry and need to be back to Coventry. Coming from the south, and virtually you have to drive practically the distance of 2 blocks, kick over 2 blocks, and come back 2 blocks where you would have just had to take a right turn. I think perceived speed is an issue. I always look at citations issued on those roads. That road gets a lot of traffic enforcement. Kingsway gets a lot of traffic enforcement. Kingsway has about 3 times as many tickets as Elmwood does. It's always assumed that that's inbound traffic. That's not necessarily true. A lot of people start to kick it up, leaving, so a lot of those tickets could be that also. So, based on my experience in my 30 years in this community, that road's never been open. I think it does kind of lock that neighborhood in. I understand if you live on that road, you like it nice and quiet. 4th Street used to be nice and quiet. We've had a subdivision, we've had some apartments built, and that's just the way of the world. I don't believe that bypass that was talked about, that bypass was always talked about as a truck route. That truck route was to start at about 115 and go out and around. That would never be the purpose of this road. It is an artery into that neighborhood, but it's not. People aren't going to decide to go on that road if they want to go out to Kingsway. I mean, that's not practical. Maybe the first time because they want to see if it's cool, but after that, they're not going through a couple of neighborhood when they can go straight down a highway and then take a right.
You have stop signs. The only stop sign you have is Plum Run, man. It's going to be a freeway. Zoom, zoom.
Who's driving there? Why would you be driving there? Because you live there. That's why you're driving there. You're not going to get a bunch of people. You're not going to get the people that are on Elmwood because they have business. They're going downtown, or they're going out to the school, or they're going out to Kingsway.
those people are still gonna take that road. It's not gonna become a major problem. Now, if the neighborhood to the east grows, then you might have more traffic. But right now, 2/3 of your neighborhood is taking care of all the traffic coming to your street.
And they signed the petition.
Yeah, well, okay, but I'm telling you, they're getting your inbound and your outbound, and they don't have any choice. And mine is just from an emergency perspective.
And when it's a reboundable and the gates help
I think
you?
that's silly. Make it a road.
Last time I spoke to you, did you not say that you thought that the hill was gonna be 4 feet taken out of it?
I said there's something going to happen to the hill. And there is.
Yeah, 1.9 feet, and that's a far cry from 3 to 4 feet, Bruce.
Here's what I know. If you come out on 3rd Street at Bridge Street, you have a much greater hill you're dealing with.
Right.
Right? For 2nd Street and Bridge Street, much greater hill. People manage them every day. Every day.
But they don't have semis coming over the hill 50 miles.
Sure they do. They absolutely do on Bridge Street.
At 50 miles an hour?
They're not coming at 50.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm telling you, I can run radar. They're not coming at 50. I can tell you that the natural feeling is a large vehicle in a curve or at a hill seems like it's going much greater than what it is. Now, I can't say they're going at 30, but they're not going 50.
Is there any specific questions for Chief Kelly regarding anything to do with emergency services?
When is the last, I do actually.
Councilmember Roloff, please.
Yes, I just wanted to make it noted, with the current proposal, I will be voting no. I truly understand the emergency side of it, but with the safety side of it, even going to the cemetery and trying to turn on the 112, you have the same problems. So, with the current proposal, I wanted to make noted on the record that I will be voting no.
Ms. Sheets? Did you have something for Chief Kelly?
Yeah, I was gonna ask him something, but now I forgot it because you got it.
Okay. Anybody else have anything for Chief Kelly? Okay, I'd like to go ahead and entertain the Councilmember Krogman, if you'd like to go ahead and restate what your motion was, sir.
I'm not going to go into detail on all the possibilities of what needs to be explored, but this is not a time to decide what we're going to say or what we're going to do.
Exactly.
We are not at decision time. We should not be stating our decision. This is a time to get information, and therefore I move that we close the discussion until a future meeting.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion, we have a second. Is there any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you. I'd like to go ahead and entertain a motion that we table 7 Alpha, the Coventry Road discussion, until we've had adequate time to go ahead and get some of the questions answered that we've discovered tonight through the generosity of our citizens who showed up, and we'd like to thank you for taking your time to come to this meeting. The input has been fantastic. I think we've all learned quite a bit. We all realize that we have some work to do in regards to what we have to do, and thank God we got some time left on the timeline prior to the 112 project starting. So with that, I'd like to entertain a motion for a temporary adjournment. It's been 2 hours, and I think we probably need a little recess.
I'd make a motion to recess.
Recess.
No, well, motion.
Oh, table. I'm sorry. First, we're going to go ahead and table the discussion on 7 Alpha.
Make a motion.
Second.
Okay. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. Monica, you have something?
I turned the mic off in case you were going into. I just wanted to say I got a message from Joe Roby, who indicated he had submitted some
We've
written
all got
comments.
that, yes.
Okay, so he thought it was going to be read publicly. Is that not going to be the case?
I think we all understand what Joe Roby said. Did you want it read for the record?
No, I thought that was Joe's understanding, so that was maybe misunderstood. That he was going to have.
Could we have the city administrator address that? Could we put in the packet for the next meeting? for one of the future meetings.
Yep, so it's been included in the packet that you received today, printed out, so you can look at it. I didn't know if Joe wanted it part of the way I discussed it with Joe is that it'd be part of the public record with the meeting. I didn't really want it read, but we can always bring it up again at the next meeting.
So the public record is not the actual packet that's online? The materials that you presented to the council tonight, are they available on your website right now?
On the website, no, but they are available via request. So,
Okay.
yep.
All right, so we can make that request. Thank you.
Okay, entertain a motion for a temporary recess for 5 minutes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
I think we're good. Yeah, I think so.
What do you mean you can leave? If I gotta speak, we're paying you, we're not paying you.
If you're on a salary,
I don't want you to talk.
I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to come back from the recess at this time.
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
This meeting is now back in order. Next item on the docket is 7 Bravo, the zoning code update, first reading, city administrator approval.
Mayor Hague, members of City Council, before you is might be an overwhelming item, and I apologize, it didn't get to you until Thursday of this last week. So what I'm proposing is to leave it open and give City Council the discretion if they want to hold the first reading tonight. If they feel comfortable with that, that is fine. If not, we can postpone that until August 12th or as directed otherwise. But you have the option. One thing to note, Planning Commission did put a lot of work into the zoning code. They did recommend it for approval by the City Council, but it's important that City Council review it. Tonight we have Community Development Director Samantha DiMaggio here to talk about a few of the talking points. As you can imagine, there could be thousands if we wanted to. So one thing, I'll talk about the process a little bit. We hired a consultant, a planning consultant, Nate Sparks, to help facilitate this process. You can see on the easel here we have the zoning map updated. Now this is in draft form, so just to make sure we're looking at this in very, very good detail to make sure if there are any changes that we make those changes before the second reading and the ultimate adoption of the zoning code. But take a look at it. If you have some questions, definitely let us know. Regarding the questions in general, if you have them, which you will as you start reading these, start jotting them down and we'll start compiling those internally. Use Ms. DiMaggio for that person to reach out to for those questions, and she'll work with Nate Sparks to develop answers to those. Hopefully by the time we're ready to adopt this, we'll have all the questions and concerns addressed by staff. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. DiMaggio for an update.
Director DiMaggio, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Hague, members of the council. Thank you for having me this evening. As Jasper said, I truly appreciate the work that the Planning Commission has put into the zoning code update. I wanted to just give you a little bit of history on why we did it. As you know, we had recently updated our comp plan and our downtown master plan. And typically after you go through a comp plan process, you then update your zoning code, because in your comp plan process, you lay out how you want your city to grow in the future. So we want to make sure that our zoning code meets what our comp plan is asking for. The last update that I can find was in 1992. I can see that Chapter 152 was done wholly in 1992. Chapter 153 was also done in 1992, and then different sections were updated along the way in 97, 01, 04, 06, 07, and 2010. But since 1992, we haven't gone through and looked at the whole thing as a comprehensive document. So that's what we have done, is we've hired a consultant to go through. They've worked with the Planning Commission. We went through one section at a time and discussed each of the options. But basically, when we went down to it, we kind of summarized it in 5 different sections. So the first reason, as I said, that we updated is to go along with our comp plan. Inside our comp plan, it talks about expanding our housing stock and encouraging new housing development. And one thing that was really important to us as we were looking at our zoning code update is we wanted to make sure that the multifamily residential was separated from the single family residential. So on the map in our previous zoning districts, you can see there's kind of a area that says R4, and it's kind of a light purple color. It goes all over our downtown, it reaches out quite a ways. Basically, in this district, they were allowing multifamily residential with single-family residential. That's a really odd thing to let everything kind of, be combined into one. So as you can see on our new map, if you look at the dark brown area, that's where we're proposing the multifamily residential to go. So any apartments, any higher level density would go in the area of brown. The yellow areas would stay single-family residential, which I think that the people in those neighborhoods would appreciate knowing that they are going to always have the single-family homes around them, not that someone could buy up 10 lots and drop an apartment next door. And that's one of the major changes that we've made. The second one is statutory changes. So some of the things that we talk about, and it was referenced tonight, state building code. Some of our statutes didn't mirror what state building code said. Because building code was updated in 2015, our statutes were last done in 1992. So we had to make sure that we brought everything up to date. So a couple of them that were, really easy to point out was our Daycare Statute and our group residential districts. Currently, in our current code, we don't even reference either one of these. So it's important that we make sure that our statutes match the state of Minnesota's. The state obviously trumps our local jurisdiction, so it's important that we go in order. And the third reason we were looking at this is anytime that we get a variance request, that's something that if you're getting a lot of variances, if you're having people say, I want to vary from your code, I want to do something different, you're getting lots of people asking this, that's a sign that you need to update your code. And one of them that we were getting quite often was our garage sizes. And I don't know if this is going to make it a ton better, but right now, if you live in town, which is basically R2, R3, R4, or R5, you're allowed 1,000 square feet. So that's your attached garage, that's if you have a detached shed. Your total garage footprint is 1,000 square feet. We've actually tried to update that in our new code, where we're saying you could have up to 1,000 square feet or the footprint of your house. So if your house is 800 square feet, your garage can only be 800 square feet. We don't want people building tiny houses with massive garages. We want them to at least be the same, or if you have a bigger house, you can have up to 1,000 square foot. Then the other thing that we added inside there is you could have up to a shed that is not attached that could give you an additional 200 square feet. So you could have a 10 by 20 shed. Check my math, Jasper, 10, right? Yeah. That would allow you then another 200 square feet. So you could have them potentially, if you lived in town, up to 1,200 square feet, which we think is actually an improvement. We've also added a section in there that talks about if you have a larger lot. So if you have less than an acre, it's 1,000 square feet. But if you have between 1 and 2 acres, you could have 2,000 square feet. We tried to kind of prorate it, going up to the maximum. If you have 3+ acres, we would allow you to have 4,000 square feet. And that's something that we've changed.
And that, just to be clear, that's total, all the outbuildings equal 4,000 feet. We're not talking about multiple buildings of 4,000 feet.
Right, yeah. So when you talk about accessory structures, it's all of them that you have, whether they're attached or detached. They all count towards the same accessory structure total. Some of the other things that, actually, I don't know if you're going to like me for this portion or not, but we've actually changed it to give some duties back to you as a city council. So currently we have a board of adjustment and of appeals. There are 3 members that sit on that. Most cities do not do this anymore. This is an old-fashioned way of doing things. Typically now it's the city council who serves as the board of adjustment and appeal. So we're moving that back to you. So if someone were to come forward and to apply for a variance or something that's happened that they're not happy with, they would actually, if the planning commission gives them a recommendation, they're not happy, they want to appeal it, then they would come to you. And really the 5th reason in my mind of why we're updating this is we want to make sure that we are development friendly in our community. As we did our comp plan and our master plan for the downtown, numerous businesses were brought up that we don't allow in our code. Also some other things, I have brew pubs, wine bars, doggy daycares. In 1992, if you were to tell someone you were taking your dog to doggy daycare, I'm pretty sure they would think you were crazy. So there's just different businesses now and we want to make sure that we stay up with it. But I've also had a ton of requests from people who want chickens and bees, and those are now in our code. We're actually addressing them. Before we did not address them. So here I have a monster stack of all the paper. I feel horrible of all the trees that I've gone through reading this code over and over and over again, but I definitely think that it's all worth it. We've also taken some zones. In the past we had commercial / light industrial. That's a very odd thing to just throw all that in together. So maybe then you would have an office building next to someone who has some type of heavy equipment business. That isn't typically done. There's usually more of a segregation. So now we've broken that down into 3 different districts. And I'm glad Isaac was here tonight to speak with you about his All Energies solar questions. I handed out each of the city council members a copy. We did take Isaac's recommendations, and I'll read them. The first recommendation that he had was to allow ground mounts to be used in more districts. The consultant did agree with that, so he's added them to the UR district, the B2, the I1, the I2, and the PI district. So that's quite a few more districts than initially.
Can you do that one more time, sorry?
Yep, and you could, this is in the board, so you can see it online. It's okay, I can send it to you. The second one that they had asked for was allow tilt up on pitched roofs. Unfortunately, our consultant did not agree with that. He said that this could have an effect on neighboring properties, and this is not common to allow this. So he would not, he was not forward in favor of going for that. He wants them all to be flush mounted on the roof, not to allow for any tilting. The third one that they had asked for was allow larger ground mounts to be permitted under normal building permit. So currently it did say 300 square feet. He's changed that, he's updated it to if it's 300 square feet on lots less than 1 acre, lots between 1 acre and 1.99 acres may have up to 600 square feet, and lots over 2 acres may have up to 900 square feet. So I think that we've taken, so I think that as I said, the Planning Commission has done a great job. They've listened to public input. We've had consultants like Isaac reach out to us who want to do business in town and taken their recommendations. It's, you know, we can't agree to every single thing that people ask for, but I think that as we went through it, we tried to be as reasonable as we can in taking in neighbors into consideration. And as I said, I think we've done a great job. I personally think that we're good to go tonight, but if there's something that, if you want to take more time, I completely understand that, and I'll follow any direction that you have.
Sam, can I get a copy of that? I missed a copy. So.
Is it on your desk?
No, it's mine. I missed one. Thank you.
I'd like to point out for the record that we'd like to go ahead and thank Mr. Isaac Lindstrom for the work that you did relative to anything associated with the solar, because obviously these changes was something that we needed to get into the planning document as well, so thank you. And is there any questions at all for our Community Development Director? We've all had ample time now. I say ample since Thursday to go ahead and read about 150 some odd pages. I certainly got some questions and concerns, and I think we already addressed all those with city staff already. So that said, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to waive the first reading of the ordinance.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes. I think we should not do this now.
Okay.
I'm a member of the Planning Commission as a non-voting member. I've been through this. And the more you look at it, the more there is to look at.
Yes.
And I think we should take we have a nice break until our next meeting, August 12th. We should be doing that, looking at it, and then waiving the first reading and moving on. And maybe not even waiving it. If somebody wants to move not to waive it, they can read it. It won't be me, I can assure you. But the point is, we need to really work on this and not just get it through. I respect the Planning Commission. I was there. I know how hard they work, but this is complicated.
Yes.
So,
Mr. Mayor, I would second that. I respect them for the work they've done, but I think it'd be irresponsible of myself to look at a 160-page document in less than 5 days and say that I agree with everything that's in it and push it forward.
Okay. So,
if I may, here's my big concern.
okay.
If you vote no on this motion that was just made, we'd have to read the darn thing. Think about it.
Yeah, that's right. And who wants to be the one to read it?
Well, then the motion can go away.
Yeah.
But if you vote no, you just voted to read it.
So let's go ahead and I'll retract my motion.
Yes, I mean.
Yeah, exactly. I'll first off retract my motion to go ahead and waive based off what we've been discussing.
Wasn't it Pam that made the motion?
No, I made the motion to waive the first reading.
If I may, I think our clerk maybe has clarification, because I have it written down differently as well.
Well, Mayor made a motion.
To waive the first reading?
Correct. Mr. Roloff seconded it, but then I think you also called for somebody else to second it
Right.
after as well.
Oh, I did?
Yes.
Okay, I stand corrected. Okay, so I retract. Do you retract, Councilmember Roloff?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to go ahead and entertain a motion and to go ahead and table this until the August 12th meeting so that we can have ample time to go ahead and read and thoroughly understand everything. And we'd like to express our thanks to the Planning Commission for all the work that they put forth, as well as city staff for all the work that they've done. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any additional discussion?
Just that, yes.
No, I'm confused because you said you'd entertain a motion.
Entertain a motion. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been a long day. Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Nope. I got.
What?
Sorry. So as you guys are reading this, send your questions to Sam. She'll compile them, and by the Wednesday before the meeting, that'll be kind of the deadline for those questions. There likely will be duplicates, but we'll try to address all of them for the meeting on the 12th. Sorry.
Yes,
Normally, when we're going through this, we have red line versions, things crossed out, things that are put in, so that we know what's been pulled
what
out
was
and what's
before,
been put in.
what is now.
Is there such a thing with this or not?
The revisions are so substantial that there isn't.
Right.
Essentially, there's some things that carried over, but there's more that's changed than what's carried over. The other thing I'll add is we do have a map, a zoning map. Take a look at it. We will have one that is on the table as well if you want to come look at it at any time. But no, there isn't really a red line version because of just the mass amount of things that have changed.
Yeah, I'm for losing where I'm at.
We're at the voting on the
Okay.
table.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried to August 12th.
Wow, these pages are getting mixed up.
Next thing on the docket is 7 Charlie, the order feasibility report for the 112 Turnback project. City Administrator approval.
Mayor Hague, members of the City Council, what you have in front of you is essentially the first step to kick off the Chapter 429 process for special assessments related to the Trunk Highway 112 project. We do have the city engineer here yet, Corey Beanfang, if he wants to give a little update on this. But essentially what we're looking for and what this does is it makes sure that the improvement that we're making takes into consideration all these different variables to make sure it's a quality public improvement. There is an attached resolution, and what we're looking for is a motion to approve that resolution. There is a schedule in here as well that you'll see in your packet. Essentially that schedule starts today if this is approved, and then we work our way all the way to the end of the Trunk Highway 112 Turnback project. You'll see there's a series of neighborhood meetings, public engagement meetings, talking about assessments in particular, the assessment role and how we generate what those assessments are. We'll talk about our assessment policy here later in this meeting, but essentially what this does is it allows a schedule for City Council to adopt those assessments if they so choose.
So my question, City Administrator Kruger, would be, is there any possibility that anything that was discussed tonight from the group of citizens that came in would change anything at all relative to our timeline?
No, but I'm confident that won't affect it. This is a very large project. There are a lot of moving parts. So we'll do our due diligence with those questions about Coventry, but as far as the project as a whole, that won't, regardless of the direction of that won't send us off schedule.
City Engineer Bainfang, did you have anything you'd like to say to City Council on this?
Nope, nothing in specific. So as Jasper said, this is very step one to allow us to follow Statute 429, and there is time on the project, but we're less than that 1 year mark, so it's very much relevant to get going and rolling on this. So nothing more to add other than that.
Okay, thank you. Entertain a motion for the adoption of the attached resolution ordering a feasibility report for the TH112 Turnback project.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. We now move on to line item 7, Delta, the Community Center membership update. City Administrator Kruger.
Mayor A, members of the City Council, we have our Community Center team here consisting of Rich Kuchera and Allison Watkins. TJ Heinrichs is here as well to offer support. With that, I'll entertain it. And essentially what this is talking about what our membership has done since we've implemented a new membership structure, talking about past presentations about membership and how we're trying to compare the two, as there's a little bit different way of looking at this, and we want to make sure that City Council is aware of some of the changes that we're seeing, but most importantly, I think the one point I've asked them to focus on is some of the new membership things that are happening. So with that, I'll turn it over to Recreation Manager Allison Watkins.
Allison, how are you this evening?
I'm well, thank
Welcome.
you. Thank you. You have been asking about membership numbers. Finally, I've gone through our system.
Could you speak into the mic, please?
Yes, sorry.
Just lower it down.
I had some time to go through our system and try to clean it up the best I can. So here's the graph is kind of showing what's happening right now. So our family memberships and our adult memberships are climbing. Everything else is kind of going up a little bit, staying even. I think the next slide. Right now we're showing a 16% monthly growth in our memberships. So that's obviously positive. And then we're putting together some things also to help our membership numbers. I have a corporate membership and a group membership sales package that we're still trying to work on the details of that. And then we'll talk to RPAC about it as well for support with it, and then bring it back to council. So some of the things that we're trying to up our numbers at the facility.
City Administrator approval.
I have a question just about the numbers, and I'm just seeing some. I see on June 19th, there's 633. As of July 15th, there's 677. So there potentially could be another bar in that graph. I just want to make sure everybody's aware of just the consistency in the numbers. The one thing I want to point out on the council report itself, there was, I think it's supposed to be 676 total. So, but to be very clear, as of July 15, 2019, we have 676 membership packages with 1,313 members. And as you can see from what it was in February, and keep in mind we're implementing a new membership structure, these things are increasing. So the trouble that we have is comparing this to the old data that we've received in the past. So one thing I would ask City Council is, I think things are changing positively out at the community center as far as memberships go. I think it's important that we establish a good baseline to make sure we have good data as far as what we're comparing it to.
Yeah, data was hard to come by with what we had set up in Max. There were multiple duplicate memberships in there that we tried to clean up. The structure of how the new membership package was not in there correctly, so we tried to put that in there correctly. So comparing to past numbers, I think you're just going to have skewed numbers, and I think going from here on in the future, I think we'll have better numbers that are actually a lot more truer than what you were seeing in the past.
Councilmember Families.
So when we had the study done, the numbers were drastically off when we had the study done. And that study was based on what information they could get their hands on.
Correct. So city staff, I exported data out of Max Enterprise at that time and gave that to the consultant to do an analysis on. So city staff generated that data, gave it to the consultant, Springstead at the time. Correct.
Okay, and based on that, I'm going to say fantastic job. Considering it's the industry that I'm in, and I knew that the numbers, they could not be right. First, you can't have that much of an offset on the membership numbers that were being projected before. The February number looks in line with what I thought it was going to truly be, and to see numbers going beyond 633. Fantastic job to you and staff.
Thank you. I think a lot has to do with the new equipment that we have as well. I think that's going over very well. I mean, the first couple months were a little iffy with questions and, change, things like that, but I think people are really excited about it and are joining because of that. So I think that was a great addition.
City Administrator Kruger.
So as we go through the budget process, this will be something that we might look at probably in October, November, in that range. We have fresh eyes again with some new employees looking at the rate structures and how we have the memberships broken out. We have a pretty complex and really, I would say, pretty complex system. Now, there's been feedback about that I've gotten, that staff has gotten. There might be some requests or some discussion about maybe combining some of them, getting it a little bit more simple, maybe changing some things up. Maybe the racquetball component should be the gym component or something like that. But staff will prepare what they propose. If you're hearing things from members, also keep that in mind. But the intent of the membership scheme that we have right now is to offer an a la carte type system where you can pick your membership length, you can pick what you're actually going to be doing. But we've gotten feedback from people that, let's say, want to just use the gym. And in order to use the gym, they have to purchase a full access membership because that's where we put that. So we'll have an active discussion about that too once we get to that process, likely starting at the personnel and budget level.
The gym is in the basketball courts?
Correct. The gym is in the basketball courts.
Did you have anything more, Ellison?
That was it?
I wanted to ask you a question relative to the business membership plan.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're working on a plan to go ahead and get to the business community, is that correct?
We are, yes.
Do we have an idea when that's going to be implemented?
Well, we have a meeting this week about it, and I'm hoping that we can bring it to you guys next meeting.
Okay.
So.
And I had asked a question earlier regarding if there's any way to break down the numbers of the 1,313 total people that we have, the 676 memberships, how many of those memberships are actually coming from outside of Sueur?
We would have to look at addresses, things like that. I mean, it's not just in our system, click resident, non-resident in Max Galaxy, so that would be harder. Other systems do have that. Like I addressed in my report, we do have issues with Max where we could be getting a lot better reporting from other systems. But to do that, I mean, we would have to look at addresses with everybody.
So ultimately, all the systems that you have at your disposal are going to be intertwined with one another, is that correct? They'll all be working with each other?
That's what we're hoping, yes.
Okay.
On entry, there's nothing that's in the system on entry that you have enter in X or enter in O, in town, out of town. Then you're not searching for any type of.
That's not a bad idea.
It's a fast way to be able to do that. I mean, the front end loaded, you'd have to go back and do that now, but for the future, because that number is going to wind up hitting 1,300 just for a standard, like an Anytime Fitness at 5,000 to 7,000 square feet. They don't even open their doors until they're at 800 members. I mean, that's a standard membership setup. We have a lot more to offer. I am curious, what are you attributing the climb? What are you doing as far as memberships? Are you doing drives with it? How are you getting out there? Because great numbers.
We do have the December drive and then the May drive. Obviously, summer helps with the pool passes, so I think you're seeing a climb there because of that as well. But I really do think with the equipment too. I think that people are hearing about it and it's new, it's exciting, and they're joining because of that as well.
Do you have a push at all on gift certificates?
We don't, not right now. It is something that I do want to look at though. Gift certificates, punch cards, we have our punch cards, but I don't think we do a whole lot with gift certificates.
Okay.
One of the things that I was curious about is that I think not only myself but others on council would be interested in regards to just exactly how many dollars we're bringing in via membership as opposed to the other potential cost centers associated with the recreational facility. So I know that that's a direction you're kind of heading, and it's certainly going to be beneficial for us as members of City Council to understand that data, because we have a rather large chunk of our general fund that supplements the community center, as we all know.
Yep.
So anything that we could do to try to reduce that number, the better it would be. And I think the difficulty might be is how we look at annual memberships as opposed to the seasonal memberships, because we can't count those seasonal memberships obviously for, you know,
Right.
the overall annual number. So
Right.
anyway, we appreciate all the effort that you've done. City Administrator Cooper, did you have something?
Yeah, so you alluded to this question, how do you qualify these memberships as we have, you know, a bunch of different things, seasonal memberships, 3 month, 1 month, full year. And what we've decided, we think that the best measure of this is to do a snapshot every month of how many membership types we have for each month, and then look at that and compare month to month as far as what happens. And you'll be able to see seasonal trends through that.
And the Galaxy system will be able to go ahead and print out a report to that fact.
No, that'll be a manually created report from what I understand. So, but we can pull the data out of Max Galaxy and then put it into like an Excel spreadsheet. I want to qualify one thing regarding the software too. In 2018, we updated our software. We had $25,000 budgeted for that item. What we ended up doing and what was recommended by staff at that time was to just update the Max Enterprise system that we have to Max Galaxy. This was a $6,000 expenditure. We then repurposed or reused some of those dollars from the software system and put those into Joe Eagle Anderson Field. So we originally we had the option to purchase a different type of software. We went down this route. And Allison and Rich, correct me if I'm wrong, Max was originally set up as like an ice arena management system that's
how Max started out.
Morphed into like a full encompassing enterprise software for a fitness center. There's other options out there, but they have costs. So what we've talked about is making what we have work, and then try to plan and do our due diligence and figure out what we need to be as successful and efficient as we can. So we'll likely be looking at the software piece again, probably not next year, but maybe the year after that.
Well, when we talk about seasonal, we haven't even gotten into what seasonal is going to be for the community center in the wintertime, because there's going to be additional programming and things, I would assume. Programming is going to have everything to do with bringing people in. It's not just going to be the equipment that's there or the room space that's there. Those programs that get set up, you're going to see, you know, memberships start happening for that, especially in the wintertime, where summertime stuff would cut off. That's what my assumption would be.
That's what we're thinking.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Councilmember Fadley's just brought up programming. I just got a quick question in regards to like swimming lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Those are run by you guys, correct?
Correct.
That's for you. I've heard through some community members that there were some changes this year to how we were running that. Do we look at that year to year and look at the numbers? Is that the intent?
Absolutely, and the format that we took this year is it's pretty standard format, going once 8-week session. It's pretty typical for other areas, so we wanted to try it this year and see how we did. We also want to do swim lessons in the fall, and I don't think they've been done in the fall in previous years. So we're trying to expand that and do more swim lessons throughout the entire year.
Okay.
But yes, I have heard some members as well say, you know, we did like it better, the old style. So we will compare the data from last year to this year with that as well, and see, you know, does it work? Is it convenient for people to do it this way or the other way? I mean, we're not going to please everybody, we know that, but we certainly try.
Yeah, and I totally understand that. I've just heard from a few people that they've gone to other communities for swimming lessons this year, and I was disappointed to hear that. So I just thought I'd ask the question. Thank you.
Anybody else from council have anything? Director Kucera, did you have anything you'd like to share?
No, I just want to say a great job to staff up there. They put in a lot of hours digging through the system so we could get what we believe are accurate numbers. And they set up a standard protocol, I would say, and a standard day that on this day they run this report and this is the steps and that's what's going to give us our number. That way, going forward, if you're not at work that day, someone else can run that same report and get our data.
So on behalf of the entire city council, this is something that we've been trying to get for the last 2.5 years, and we're very grateful for all the work that you guys have put forth, and thanks the rest of the team from us guys. Okay. And there's no action necessary on this particular item. This is informational only, so thank you very much for giving us the update.
Thank you.
Next item on the docket is 7 Echo. It's the sidewalk and trail policy. City Administrator approval.
Mayor Hague, members of City Council, before you is a sidewalk and trail policy that has been written. One question or a couple questions that have come up about this are what the plan would be is to do a full citywide sidewalk inspection by June of 2020, and then after that we would quarter off each section of the city and do a quarter of the city each year. This is standard practice. Ideally, I mean, we could do a complete survey every year, but the way sidewalks morph and change, they don't change that much from year to year. I feel an all-encompassing survey, 100% in year one, and then doing a 25% each year will satisfy any requirements, and we're conscious of time and the money it costs to do those. So inspections. So with that, I'll turn it over to Public Services Director Kuchera.
Director Kuchera, welcome again.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yeah, just to follow up on that, this is kind of boilerplate language from the League of Minnesota Cities out of their policy section, and the initial citywide is verbatim right out of them, and the 4 quadrants is verbatim out of them. They want you to basically keep eyes on the ground and have a set schedule, and that's what we're doing here. The city, and then also follow up a full citywide survey. That's pretty extensive. When we had like a lot of lineal feet, 62,000 feet currently, and with another project coming to add to that. So the best thing for this, it'll give staff some guidelines to follow up on. Plus, working with Mr. Heinersee back there, he wants to try to make this so the public can also inform us of issues, so it's kind of a uniform guidance. It's city staff, but then the public will know what we're looking for, what are deficiencies, what deficiencies will be taken care of immediately, planned out for the future, so we can kind of get a teamwork going on to move this forward. As mentioned earlier, it is in here that all city trails are maintained by city staff, and then any sidewalks adjacent to city trails would also be taken care of. I mean, we're already sending equipment down, they're coming back, they can pick up a sidewalk on the way back. So, is there another one, or is that it?
I think the question that I had earlier regarding an annual inspection, I probably didn't say it right when I asked the question, but what I was really looking for is that if we happen to notice that there's any kind of deterioration like after the winter, we certainly want to try to make sure that we identify any potential trip hazards and things of that nature that could potentially be a liability to the city of the Sueur. So that's something like that would be possible to do.
Yes, correct, Mayor. And that's why TJ has kind of come up with this. That's his inspection form there. That way the public could actually go ahead and tell us of something that they see. So if we're not scheduled to be in that quarter of town this year, hey, they can let us know. They can, take a picture, they can fill out the form, get it to us. Saves us time.
Any questions for Director Kuchera?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor. Will this be on our website? City website?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the attached sidewalk and trail inspection and maintenance policy as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you very much, gentlemen, on that. We now move on to line item 7, Foxtrot, which is a snow removal policy review. City Administrator approval.
Mayor Hague, members of City Council, as many of you remember, we adopted a snow removal policy last year. There's been some questions about when we're going to review this and get input from this group on if that policy worked or not, and now is the time. So this may be a continuing conversation as I know that there's some ideas out there that we should talk about, one being even on parking and things like that. So I would definitely utilize this time to get familiar with the current policy. I'll turn it over to Rich, but there are very minimal updates to it, but if there's questions or concerns that we need to address at a later city council meeting, definitely let us know, and we can address those and compile some answers. One in particular, being about even odd parking. So, with that, I'll turn it over to Public Services Director Kuchera.
Director Kuchera.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yes, last year when we did approve the original one, we did say we'd come back and review and discuss this, and that's what we're here for. The one thing we did hear from public is that they would like to know about it on the news sources, on the TV news. So those were added in to try to help that out. That is really the only change that we put into this at this point. That's why we're back here to ask for opinions and feedback.
City Council, or Council Member Sullivan.
Is there a reason the Mankato station isn't included in the TV?
It can be.
I just know that's something that's pretty common in Sueur for people to watch the Mankato channels for school closings.
Yeah, if I may. I think it's an oversight. I think they're on the email list that we have. We send it to them, so we'll add KUIC to that as well, because it's local.
Are those only television? There's no radio? Mayor, you spoke today.
K-Check, yes.
K-Check's in the policy, right?
K-Check is already in the policy.
Okay, it's just not on the screen.
Yeah, so on the screen, those are the ones that we're proposing to add. The encompassing list of media sources is in the actual policy.
Thanks.
So K-Check is part of that one.
I'm confused. If the packet indicated we're being asked to approve this, now I'm hearing give us feedback and we'll come back with it.
If there's
the latter correct? Okay, I have two corrections. I sent them to Jasper earlier today, or actually last Thursday. One is when we talk about towing vehicles that are in violation of the policy, we should indicate in some way that the person whose vehicle is towed is going to pay for it when they want to get it back. We shouldn't just say we're going to tow it. It's not a free towing. They're going to pay. The second is there's an old reference to the Sueur News Herald. Of course, that's been over. The change of name it's now the Sueur County News.
If I may, we'll add a reference to the governmental fee schedule, which City Council adopts every year, and in there we put what it costs to tow and what the daily impound fee is. So we'll reference that fee schedule in here, and we'll make that change with the Sueur County News as well.
Did anybody else have anything regarding the snow removal policy that they'd like to go ahead and offer up at this time? I know one of the things that we had talked about after last winter was the possibility of looking at one side of the road type of snow removal. Is that something that is completely off the table then, because of the feasibility of trying to do something of that nature?
I can weigh in a little bit. Rich, feel free to chime in. The deal with the even odd, there's more coordination with all of your emergency services, like police. In particular, the ones that are writing the tickets, so that they have to understand it. It's a little bit more complex system. In practice, it's more difficult to clear the road when there's no cars on the road. A plow can go down and back, clear the road more effectively. Now, I think the issue, and I think the reason why even odd is discussed, is because we have residents in town that don't have off-street parking. Or they have off-street parking, but not enough for the number of vehicles that they have. One thing, and we could look at adding it to the code is designating public parking areas for people with that situation, and telling them that you need to park in this area. That means that we need to clear those parking lots before we actually declare the snow emergencies. There's a little bit of a coordination there. In practice, last year, that's what we ended up doing. Is if somebody had a concern about not having off-street parking, we gave them the option to park in like the mall parking lots. Now, if you remember in February, I think it was February when we got all that snow, the parking lots got really rough because there were so many people parking in it. We couldn't effectively clear it as if there were no cars in there. So there would need to be some incorporation of when do we clear those parking lots so that they don't get out of hand. The even odd, it's just another day, so your emergency lasts for a couple days. It's not something. It's something that is done in more urban settings like Minneapolis, St. Paul, because in those communities it's higher density housing typically, and sometimes you don't have any options for off-street parking. I don't know if there are any other considerations. We can definitely look at it and come up with a draft policy if we want to look at it further. But there are challenges to it. One thing, I think that a lot of the issues can be alleviated by maybe putting in a component for public parking and letting people park somewhere if they have off-street. Or if they, what another community does that we're familiar with, they issue permits, but for off-street parking, so you could get a permit for your car. That's a whole nother program, more administrative costs, things like that. So I think having the option for people to park in our parking lots is probably the best option, but we can look at even odd parking if we want to. That'd be a major change. As you remember, there were some growing pains with the first couple snow emergencies. We declared one, we didn't enforce it, we just kind of got the word out, then the next one we ticketed, and the next one we ticketed and towed, and then every subsequent one after that we ticketed and towed. So eventually people understood what they needed to do. It was expected because this community hasn't declared a snow emergency for quite some time. So, with that, we can change it again, but we'd likely experience some growing pains as well.
Streets and Parks Manager Heinrich, do you have anything to offer to the conversation next?
Well, I understand parking's a top priority. We do have a problem with off-street parking. We do have that problem. The public parking idea is a great idea. My one apprehension about odd and even parking is the fact you're gonna push everybody to one side of the street. You're gonna leave a ridge alongside those cars. So sometimes that can be detrimental just as much, because that's gonna freeze and thaw, and then how do you get it back up? And we're going to turn around and spend a little more money trying to get that off with chemicals, plowing, this and that. Odd even works, but I like City Administrator Krugel's idea of trying to find a feasible parking lot where we can get to them, and yes, that can be a problem, but snow emergencies was a new animal that we brought to your town. I understand that, and I think through education and communication, we can make this work, because number one, winter is public safety, number one is in my field, and I need to make it safe, we need to make it easier for people to get around, and I think that's why we're here asking you for your input.
Well said. Speaking of input, is there anybody that has anything else they'd like to offer as far as input to the snow removal policy?
I do.
Councilmember Brooklyn.
I do not favor odd even. I think what the point you just made is get the whole street clear, get the cars off of it, and get it back working. I think last winter was kind of maybe a harbinger of something, because it was a bad snow winter, and it helped us think through this. So I like the idea of having a designated parking area. I realize that's inconvenient for some people that don't have parking off street, but it's better for the entire city to do it that way. It will clear our roads quicker, in my opinion, if you don't have to come back and get ridges and so forth off. So.
Okay. Anybody else have anything? Well, with the addition of KEYC to the list of television stations and to the other media outlets, also the fee schedule to be included relative to towing, and looking for a designated parking area for those that do not have the opportunity to park on the street. Is there anything else that I'm missing?
We just had the Sueur County News. That's not a big deal.
Yeah, okay, well, the Sueur County News as well for item Bravo Charlie, 3 Bravo Charlie. So, with all that said, can I entertain a motion for the approval of the attached City of LeSueur snow plowing policy dated July 15th, 2019?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We now move on to line item 7, golf, which is the 2019 spring flooding update. City Administrator approval.
Mayor Hague, members of City Council, as you've seen in our disbursement reports, we've had a lot of expenditures related to our flooding that doesn't ever seem to end. There was quite a bit of damage done, and Public Services Director Kuchera is here to give an update to City Council, talk about the disaster declaration that's been declared for Sueur County and the City of Sueur, and also what to expect regarding timelines with reimbursements, potential reimbursements, and what else is out there that we need to be aware of. So with that, Public Services Director Kuchera.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yes, on June 12th, the President did declare a major disaster for the County of Sueur, which includes the City of Sueur. We itemized list damages for Doppy Lane, Woods Drive, J Street, Mayo Park, River Park, and the compost site. I believe our preliminary estimates were in the $400,000 to $500,000 range, and our preliminary numbers are appearing to be close to correct. But, currently, we had I would say, me, myself, and Justin Nielsen attended the disaster kickoff last month. We are waiting for our project manager to give us a call, set up our project meeting because each one of these items will be a separate project. So we'll get the projects wrote up for repairs. When we do that, we will be inquiring about mitigation funding along with this disaster. The legislature did approve just over $4 million in mitigation funding. So we will be asking about River Park, Mayo Park, doing some mitigation, Doppy Lane, what can we mitigate there so this problem does not happen again. And if we can apply for those, we will be applying for mitigation money.
City Administrator approval.
I just want to point out the pictures, so everybody gets their bearings straight on this. Maybe you guys all know where these are. The left one is Doppy Lane, the top one is the compost site, and the bottom one is that just River Park.
Yeah, that's River Park.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
the bathrooms at River Park.
Yeah, it was there was a pretty significant flood event this spring, so there's things going on. Doppy Lane is a major challenge, and that was kind of the big thing I wanted to talk about or have the group talk about, is because we've had to haul in a lot of material into Doppy Lane. We've had to haul a lot of material out of the Cambria lot because that's where it ends up after it washes out. So, and that material that you haul out that gets washed down, you can't reuse that. All the fines have been removed. You have rock. So there's been a lot of expenditures. We want to make sure that City Council understands what those are for. And then hopefully Rich can talk about potential reimbursement timelines for some of these expenditures, which it's not ideal.
Thank you. Like I said, we're waiting to meet with our project manager, complete the project worksheets, apply for hazard mitigation. Once we find a project is approved, then we can begin work. The funds that have been expensed to date, when and what is approved will be submitted for reimbursement right away. Timeline can be anywhere from 18 to 24 months to see those funds. There is no guarantee even on the 18 to 24 months to see those funds. There's entities out there from 2 years ago that have not got their disaster money yet. So I'm not going to put anything up here in writing saying that we will see our money, anything.
And that brings up a question that I have for the City Administrator. We budget on an annual basis, but one of the things I don't think that we take into consideration necessarily is the potential for $400,000 to $500,000 worth of storm damage to occur in a given year. We're making repairs towards these different items right now. We're trying to mitigate the situation the best we can. But just to be clear, we're looking at potentially 18 to 24 months before we receive any funding back, if we were going to get anything back at all. So I guess my question to you, Mr. City Administrator, would be, what do you recommend that a council does moving forward, knowing that we just had an event like this and potentially there could be the possibility of this happening again? Is this something we want to go ahead and potentially budget for moving forward?
That's a great question, and one will hope that this was an abnormal year. If we have 2 years in a row like this, then I'd say something like we need to set up a fund, an emergency fund that we would then try to fund over a period of time. Right now, every year, the city council budgets a contingency amount. So, if you remember from 2019 budget, we had about $250,000 in that contingency fund. Now, we've used some of that. We code this stuff to the street department and track it for flooding, so we can track all of these things. And the street department's the general fund, which is the same as the contingency fund. But if there gets to be a point where our finance director is saying, hey, these are exceeding our contingencies that we've already put in place, we would have a conversation with city council. There's a couple ways we could do it. We could just do a motion and a resolution saying that we acknowledge that this is happening. We could do what's called a formal budget amendment, and we would actually change our budget that we adopted back in December. City of Sueur has, from my records and my knowledge, never done this. But that's a way to do it, and that documents any sort of expenditure that was unplanned for auditing purposes. If we get to that point, we have to bring that forward to city council. But at this time, we're still okay. If this happens again, where we have $800,000 in damages potentially, then we will have to revisit the conversation. But we hope that we don't have another year like this. And as I alluded to in some responses, we're really just addressing some access issues and life safety issues that we need to do for like Doppy Lane and Woods Drive. There are still, the majority of the projects are going to sit there until we figure out what we're going to do for funding. So bear with us. Mayo Park does not look very good, but we can't access the park right now with our equipment without burying the equipment. So underneath that grass that you see growing is wet, mucky sugar sand. So we've tried to get out there, but we've had some issues with getting the equipment stuck. So you might get comments from the public about Mayo Park in general, but just know that we're working on it. We're doing everything we can. If we could get out there efficiently, we would. That would be cut down. So.
Okay, well, let me sort of rephrase now, just to be sure that I understood what you just said. We have $250,000 in the contingency fund. We have an identifiable $400,000 to $500,000 in damages. Obviously, we're not in a position right now because of the difference in the math to go ahead and address all those different damages. So we're only going to handle the first $250,000 and waive the other until.
Correct, and I don't know if that total will be $250,000. It hasn't hit that point yet. But if we do want to, we would need to have a conversation if that's something we want to do this year. I think the safe thing would be is we have damaged amenities and assets. Wait until FEMA gets back to us and says, are they going to fund this or not, and then move forward. We run the risk of doing something that we may not want to do if it's a long-term solution, and that's where Rich alludes to the mitigation money. And what that means is we change something up so that it works in a flood zone, as opposed to right now, FEMA might pay us to seed the area in Mayo Park with grass, and that isn't a long-term solution. So, and if we have to pay for it out of our own money, we would want to do something with a long-term solution if this is going to continue to happen. So it buys us some time to do some planning. So I think we're good right now. Zach, he'll be providing the Q2 report here, I think in August. So we'll be able to look at it a little bit more closely. But right now we're okay with our contingencies that we've set.
Councilmember Families.
Yeah. So for River Park, which is more like River Float, we just did repairs on the boat launch, and somewhere along the line in discussions, I thought somebody said that we're right back to having that undermined, or is that not true?
No, incorrect. It's not been, we haven't proved it's undermined yet. It's actually continual. Every time the river floods or gets high again, we get a fair amount of, we'll call it silt building up on the dam. Not undermined yet, but when the spring flood came up, it covered all of our so-called first December work. It covered everything up because we had it all sloped back, and then we virtually started back again and cleaning everything off again. We've gotten back to where the landing is usable. Is it 100%? No. are the bathrooms open? No. So it's still a makeshift park. The boat landing is there.
I think I just heard reference today about Jordan having that undermining situation that you're referring to, so, yeah, they still don't have that open.
So part of this is, I'm looking at it, is there, this is not a once a year or a once thing. The dump section there is flooded a number of times now, and they kept building up that wall of dirt, thinking that hopefully that was going to help, and that really hasn't helped. I mean, the pictures really show that. But is there a point here where we abandon certain things altogether and stop putting money into it, because we've got other places to put money into? And I've been hearing about DOPI since before I even ran for council, and we kept asking questions as to how much money was being put into DOPI, and it's a constant continuous. So when do we have some type of a scenario that it's fixed with this? Is there anything there?
Yes, definitely. So you probably noticed we moved our compost site around a couple times already. We can't move it back down to the river with the stage that it's in right now. It's just not accessible. The area that we're in right now, our temporary location, it's difficult accessibility wise. We hope that it dries out eventually, but it's unpassable down by the river at the moment. So yes, there are things that we're going to have to make a decision about if we're going to abandon it or not. Part of what Rich and TJ are working on right now is a street plan for the city. So a 10-year street plan talking about what sections of the city, what road sections we're going to try to either repair, or in some cases, like in Doppy Lane, maybe put asphalt down, because of just it's a better solution than to continuously put gravel, dig out frost boils, things like that. So City Council will have the opportunity to weigh in on that. We have some ideas internally that we're working on right now to try to make sure whatever we're going to talk about with the personnel and budget and the City Council is actually feasible financially for the city. So that's the biggest component that we're working on right now. Is we've touched base on this in the first personnel and budget committee meeting with the budget for 2020. Is we have some bonds that are falling off. We want to balance that, and we want to ladder those bond payments so that it doesn't adversely affect the property taxes in town. So you won't see a huge spike when we do a project. It's related to a bond falling off that we previously had. And we're going to try to balance that the best we can and come up with a plan. So areas like Doppy Lane and Woods Drive, they're on our radar. Definitely. Bowright Street, things like that. But we also want to make sure we're addressing the existing streets that we currently have too, and make sure that those are being taken care of, as well as addressing some of the gravel that we have in town. So we're trying to work on a balance, and we'll be bringing that forward here probably towards the early fall, late summer, for City Council to just take a look at least for the next 5 years. Ideally, we would have a 10-year plan that we know what we're going to do, we know how we're going to finance it, and it's just essentially implementing the plan. So we'll get there eventually, and definitely flood mitigation is something that drives these discussions. Drives Doppy Lane potentially moving up on that list because of the sheer amount of money and the sheer amount of issues that we've had with that road this year.
Anybody else have anything? Please keep us updated in regards to the hazard mitigation grant status, so that we as a council know what's going on with that. This is an informational item only, so there's no action necessary on this. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for the update.
Thank you.
We now move on to 7 Hotel, which is the wind turbine relocation update. City Administrator approval.
Mayor Haig, members of City Council, this item was tabled at the last discussion, or at the last City Council meeting. There has been some substantial information gathering with this via Public Services Director Kuchera and Council Member Krogman. working on this, and ultimately and Councilmember Krogman, feel free to add anything I miss, but ultimately what we found is that the area that we were proposing to put the windmill in, or the wind turbine in, is a low wind resource area. So we really try to have it's called an average wind speed of 11 miles per hour. In this area, we're at about 2 miles per hour on average, less than what we would likely want. Now, we've talked about this wind turbine isn't really there to make any money. It's more of a marketing and description of what we are and who we are. But our group, Rich, Newell, and myself, we think that the wind turbine should move. We think it should actually work and be a symbol. So because of that, what's being recommended, and there's a motion or a resolution that has been included and handed out, just so that we can provide feedback to MMPA, that the resolution essentially states that we want to repurpose the wind turbine that we have located south of town right now to be used given to Elk River, refurbished, given to Elk River. And then we want to continue to explore the ability to have a solar installation in lieu of a wind turbine. We think that would fit our community better. There is no real good place to put a wind turbine in Sueur because the wind, just being in the river valley, the wind isn't consistent enough for it to turn. That's why you don't see wind turbines farms around this area. But solar, on the other hand, now there's a potential there that could actually, maybe have, I wouldn't say make money, but have a better ROI on it than a windmill that doesn't produce any energy. So, what you have in front of you that we've handed out is a resolution stating just that we want to repurpose that existing wind turbine, give it to Elk River, and then just continue the conversation with MMPA about getting a solar option for Sueur. Councilmember Krogman, if there's anything I missed, please chime in.
Director Sueur can also chime in. We explored noise. There will be some, no matter, even if it's a minimal amount, it's going to be noisy. We have some visual issues there that were considered, and I submitted, I think, 13 questions to MMPA. The motion, the resolution you have in front of you basically summarizes the alternative proposal, which is basically that it's not a suitable site. The word suitable, I drafted this, it took me 7 words to find the right suitable word to put suitable there. Think about it, it fits. It's just not going to fit where we want it, or it won't fit where we put it. Elk River is going to need one. They're new to the MMPA. They are going to be provided one no matter what, and this would basically save MMPA the cost of a new turbine. We are supporting renewable energy in our community. We have a number of people who pay extra every month right now, for example, for renewable energy. We want to showcase that within the city, that we support renewable energy. And a moderately sized solar facility would be useful for us. It would also be not at our expense. This would be at MMPA's expense, to be very clear. And so the resolution you can see there, or the resolution would ultimately read that we relocate the turbine. I didn't specify in there to Elk River that MMPA can put it anywhere they want, but it'll be in Elk River, or if they need one in another one of our cities, or one of 12 cities in the group. And then at their expense, we're asking them to install a moderately sized solar facility within our city limits, and noting that both the location and the size of that facility would be mutually agreed upon. Recognizing that moderately sized may be vague. We're not looking for a big one. We don't want a real small one, but we'll negotiate it. But this needs to go to MMPA if we pass it, so they can authorize it. So I'll leave it at that and ask Director Sueur if he has any more to add.
So is
the idea that it would be at the same site that we were talking about putting the windmill?
That's not specified if you look at the resolution. That could be the site, but the solar would give us a little more flexibility. Okay? This is all at a site to be mutually agreed upon. Doesn't mean it'd be there, although that would be still a good site to do it. But it may be that when we look at other possibilities, that land could be better used by the city for something else and find another site. This just gets the process started, folks. Thank you for asking.
Anybody else have anything? Entertain a motion for the approving of the resolution as drafted and withdrawal policies as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you very much, Councilmember Grobman, and for drafting up the resolution and for all the work that's been done by city staff regarding the windmill situation.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, real quickly.
Please.
City staff has been phenomenal in helping. This is a good example where you have a representative. In my case, I'm the one. But city staff has absolutely been superb, so thank you, man.
Thank you, John. We now move on to line item 7, India, which is the Planning Commission appointment. City Administrator Kruger.
Mayor Hague, members of City Council, we do have a vacancy on our Planning Commission. That vacancy has a term that ends at the end of 2021. We had one applicant that had previously submitted an application, Andrea Fatchis. She has indicated that she would like to be considered for this appointment. We have also received 2 additional applicants during this period of time. One is Judith Jones and the other is Julie Sheehy. With that, I will turn it over to the mayor as far as the process goes related to this and how we want to handle motion, seconds, things like that for a planning commission appointment evaluation.
We've all had an opportunity to take a look at the 3 resumes that have been supplied to City Council. I would like to go ahead and offer up a recommendation for Andrea Fatchis to fill that position. I'd like to make a motion to that effect.
Second.
Is there any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay. So we have a 6-1 on that, so Miss Andrea Fatchis is now a new member of our Planning Commission. Okay, we now move on to 7 Juliet, the open meeting law policy, standing committee meetings, City Administrator Kruger.
Mayor Hague, members of City Council, I have added this back into the agenda. This is something that we talked about back in November of 2018, correct? So this is me just kind of following up with this, coming with a formal policy draft with the information that I had. In general, what we're trying to accomplish here is conflicts with open meeting law, which we abide by, related to having a quorum of city council members at a standing committee meeting. What these terms are, and I don't want to deter city council members from wanting to go to, let's say, an EDA meeting, but we think it's important for, if you choose to do that, to let me know if you're planning on going to that meeting so that I can evaluate if there's going to be a quorum of city council members at that meeting. Now, we're being very conservative related to the open meeting law. Now, you all, let's say we could have 7 members of the city council, everybody at a meeting. If you guys never talk to each other, we would never have an open meeting law violation. But that typically doesn't happen. You guys are all acquaintances in town, and there's things that come up that aren't related to city council that you may talk about. So, in order to keep, and this is the general idea of this, is to keep the public perception that the business of the city is done in the open. And that's the number one thing. There have been cities that have had open meeting law violations, and it's really not a huge fine or anything like that should deter city council members from taking the open meeting law serious. It's the public perception that even if business isn't being conducted, the perception that somebody might say, well, we think you're conducting business behind closed doors. That's what we really, really care about. So, we care about it because it's a law, but that's the number one fallout from it, is that the public perception of the city council and making sure that perception isn't tainted. So what we want to do and what the policy states is that if I'm aware that there's going to be a quorum of city council members at a meeting, I will notice it as a city council meeting. That might be as simple as putting something at the bottom of the agenda that this is noticed as a city council meeting. One thing we have to be conscious about is these unscheduled or special meetings these would fall under. They need to have 3 days notice. So if you're planning on going, or if you want to go to every single EDA meeting, just let me know, and I'll make record of it, and I'll try to manage the noticing requirements. So, in general, we recommend not doing it for the simplest reason is that we have standing committees, breakout kind of groups for kind of individualized areas. It defeats the purpose, and it may actually make the process more difficult if we get 6 people to go to personnel and budget committee meetings. Then, in that situation, it would make sense to have that agenda item those topics be a city council meeting. And we try to divvy up the work amongst city council members and the groups that you're appointed to so that you can, do some of that work and provide input to city council. So that's the big thing about the standing committee attendance policy is that if you're gonna go to a meeting, just let me know, and I'll try to coordinate the open meeting law requirements. If there's an issue, I'll let you know. But I also don't want to deter anybody who has a special interest in engaging in a meeting, the EDA meeting. If you just show up to it, that's fine too. One thing I will just kind of watch is that there's no real interaction amongst, let's say, the 3 personnel and budget committee meetings and somebody that shows up. Just for that simple reason. So,
does this policy only applies to meetings, correct? What about like a social? I mean, there's times we get together during giant celebration or during Christmas, right on the float.
We actually publish that.
Yeah, so that's a great question because there's a distinction between these two things. So socially, you guys are fine. I mean, you all understand it. You know not to conduct the business behind closed doors or, have a talk about who's voting for what. That's understood. So the social interactions, those are fine. When we're in a more formal setting and we're actually discussing city business, like with the personnel and budget committee meeting, that's a little bit different, So this is just for those standing committee meetings, and I think the list is listed in the policy. We have Housing and Redevelopment Authority, Planning Commission, Fire Commission, Economic Development Authority, Board of Zoning Appeals, which may be going away with this zoning code update. We also have Minnesota River Valley Public Utilities Commission, Minnesota River Valley Transit Committee, Personnel and Budget Committee, Recreation and Park Advisory Committee, and then it has the nuance of any other board or commission that may be out there. So for Councilmember Kirby, like a hospital board meeting, if we all of a sudden have 3 other members of council that want to show up to that, that's one of those other ones. I don't see that scenario happening very frequently, if at all. But if that's the case and you want to go to a hospital board meeting, definitely let me know and I'll do the math and we'll figure out if there's going to be a quorum.
I have one question. I always wanted to ask this question is, suppose I want to go to the EDA meeting as a citizen resident of Sueur, not as a city council member. Do I still have to tell you I'm going to it?
That's another great question. If I would prefer that, so that I can internally figure out if there's going to be a quorum of city council members there and try to satisfy that open meeting law. But no, we want to make sure that you can still engage in those situations. And you can just show up to that meeting, that's fine. But we're just trying to establish some policies. There's no repercussions for doing that. A simple email or a text or anything to me, I think it would be fine, just as long as we know and you know how to conduct yourself at that meeting. I trust that. So.
All right, thank you.
And I think everything that you said, it's spot on. We certainly don't want to get ourselves into a situation where we're ever violating the open meeting policy. And regarding your concern about like the parades and things of that nature, which would be a time where we would all be together outside of council chambers, that is actually noticed in the newspaper, and it's also put up on the bulletin board. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that we're covered.
But we can talk.
Oh yes. We just don't conduct city business.
Finally.
Okay. So that said, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the city council standing meeting attendance policy.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. We now move on to 7 Kilo, the assessment policy adoption. City Administrator approval.
Mayor Hague, members of City Council. Before you is a continuation of a conversation we had about a month ago about special assessment policies for the city of Sueur. As some may be aware, some assessment policies get quite complicated regarding front yard, side yard, frontage, things like that. The letter of the law states that we can't assess anything, we can't assess anything to a property that exceeds the actual benefit received. So what's being proposed here, and I'll just go through it quickly. What's being proposed for everything that we want to or potentially want to assess special assessments to is a benefit appraisal. And what that is somebody, an independent appraiser comes in and compares what your property, just the land value of your property is worth prior to and then after a construction event. And what we can do and what City Council has the ability to do is say how much that assessment's going to be. But if we have a legal battle or a legal consideration where somebody questions our benefit, we have the backup to prove that we've done our due diligence. And from year to year and project to project, the value and the benefit can change quite a bit, or it can. One thing that Sueur has a little history is Morningside Drive had some assessments that were disputed and then found in favor of the complainant that we did not follow the Chapter 429 process. So what this does is it really outlines, it's a fail-safe way to be able to levy special assessments in a manner that protects us legally. So I'll jump back to sidewalk and trail special assessments. City Council has taken past action to not levy for any of these sidewalks or trails. That is not being proposed to be changed at all. So essentially we're declaring or saying that sidewalks and trails serve a public purpose and should be assessed to the adjacent property owners. Roadway improvement and repair special assessments. So I'll read this. All road surface improvement projects that replace any portion of the road surface shall utilize a benefit appraisal to determine the benefit to any properties, of which will be used to determine the assessment levied against said property. Projects that are included in this section of the assessment policy include, but are not limited to, mill and overlay projects, reclamation projects, and full surface rehabilitation projects. Projects that are exempt, and this is important because it really talks about maintenance, so street surface maintenance, exempt from this assessment policy include, but are not limited to, seal coating, crack sealing, spot curb repair, and any other normal surface maintenance. So special assessments shall be levied using guidance from Minnesota Statute Chapter 429, which allows City Council control over the final levied amounts. So what that process entails, just to recap, City Council will build in benefit appraisals into project costs. We'll conduct these benefit appraisals, but ultimately staff will prepare and present an assessment roll to City Council. And that assessment roll will be based on that benefit appraisal. City Council has full control over those assessments. If they want to, let's say, I don't think this is realistic, but if you want to go above what the benefit appraisal is, you guys, the City Council has the power to do so. But if you want to lower it based on outside factors, or somebody comes in to dispute their benefit appraisal and you feel that their dispute was qualified, you can then adjust anything you want as a board.
I thought that you couldn't raise it above what the appraisal was, that was against the law.
It really is.
Okay, so
it is.
We have full authority to break the law.
You could, and you might have to, but
do it.
The way the chapter's written is that City Council is the body that levies those assessments. Okay. You would never get a recommendation from staff to levy more than what the benefit appraisal is, because not right, but the point is, city council as a body has full control over what the levied amounts are. But somebody could come in and say, I don't think it's $5,000, I think it's $4,000 for these reasons. If they convince city council, you could do an individualized levy. So that's for those surface improvements. The last section, new roadway and utility construction special assessments. So what this section really talks about is if we're going to be replacing any of the utilities under the road, or if we're putting in a new road altogether, we can assess for that. It uses the same language about following Chapter 429, which allows you, the board, city council, to have full control over the levied assessments. And what that ultimately means is that if there's a project that city council as a whole doesn't want to levy any assessments for whatever reason, city council can take action and say, we have this policy, but for this reason, we're not going to levy assessments. Maybe we get a large grant to put in some roads for like an industrial park or something like that. Under this policy, you sure could assess to those adjacent property owners, but you might say, well, because this is funded through state, federal sources, we're not going to levy any assessments. I reiterate, city council has the full control. So there is a policy in draft form included in the packet. If there's any questions about that, feel free to ask me. What we're looking for is potentially adopting this. There's no real hard timeline on this, as we've obviously started the Chapter 429 process tonight because we issued or ordered that feasibility report, and we can do it however which way we want. This just gives guidance to current and future staff.
The members of city council feel they've had adequate time to go ahead and evaluate the assessment policy.
Yes.
Yes.
I do have a question.
Please.
Jasper, one of the standard procedures we use in this city is to use the whatever they call the method, and maybe you already said it, but I want to get it clear for everybody, where they put an oil surface down, tar, and then they put the stones on top. What is that called?
Seal coating loading.
Okay, so that's exempt under this policy.
Correct.
Okay, to be very clear.
Yep. Councilmember Sullivan.
I'm going to go off topic for a moment. I actually have to excuse myself. I have to use my job, but I have nothing to report tonight. So,
Thank you. Anybody else?
You gonna vote on this?
yeah, we're ready.
Anybody else on anything? I'll entertain a motion then to adopt the City of Sueur special assessment policy.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. Now move on to 7 Lima, which is the capital lease item approval, city administrator approval.
Mayor Hague, members of City Council, before you is a kinetic lease purchase authorization for one item. It's essentially equipment for the facility service truck. It's a power inverter and compartment for it, totaling $1,224. What we're requesting is a motion approving the submission of the payment request form for that amount to Kinetic Leasing.
Does anybody have anything to offer on this one? Entertain a motion to approve the execution of the payment request form attached to this agenda item to Crystal Trek Equipment for $1,224.
So move.
Second. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Last item on the agenda is 7 Mike, approval of public dance permit with Sueur Lions. City administrator approval.
Mayor Hague, members of City Council, you should have received a staff memo about the approval of the public dance permit for the Sueur Lions. With this would normally be a consent agenda item, but because it wasn't included in the packet, we are discussing it on the regular agenda. So what we're looking for is a motion to approve the public dance permit for the Giant Celebration Team Dance as outlined above.
Can I entertain a motion for?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Can I entertain a motion for approving the public dance permit for the Giant Celebration Team Dance as outlined above?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Let the record show that Councilmember Sullivan was not present for the vote on 7 Mike. Okay, now we're at that point where we're going to go ahead and have comments reports and items of appreciation. And going back to the point that City Administrator Krugel made about the whole thing dealing with open meeting law violations, is exactly why we do this, so that those of us that are not on some of these committees, we get an understanding as to what's going on with these things. So I know we all understand that, but I just wanted to reiterate that again for the public. So with that said, we'll start off with council member families tonight.
Had personnel and budget meeting, and I have to say I'm truly the newbie on that, and I will be for a while until they learn me well. MRPUC is coming up. So far, it sounds as though we're going to have a quorum, so we're going to see how that goes. And appreciation-wise, went down to the temporary, possibly permanent dump site today, and the new bucket loader was out there, and it was rather impressive to watch because he's got this claw to be able to pick up the trees and move to a different location. And I had to stop the guy just to, see what he thought of it. And, I really like driving it. The first thing he said was, "This makes my job so much easier." He said, "We used to just have to try to pick up the trees that are constantly falling out of the bucket." He says, what was an all-day event I'm able to do in just a few hours with picking it up and moving location. So again, the right tool for the right thing. So it's nice to see.
Anything else? Thank you, Councilmember Krogman.
Yeah, tomorrow is the annual meeting of the Minnesota Municipal Power Association, or agency, MMPA. I'll be attending that. Some other people from the city staff will be attending. Mr. Mayor, you will also. And there's also a regular meeting of the MMPA tomorrow. And I will present our resolution that we passed this evening then. And then on Wednesday, I'll be going to Bemidji for the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities meeting, Wednesday through Friday. And I'll report back after that. But I'm honored to represent us there and can assure you we'll bring back some good information. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, sir. Councilmember Huntington.
Mr. Mayor, last week we had our MRVT meeting, working on our 2020 budget. And then I have HRA meeting it's not that late, it's Wednesday. 4 o'clock, Hillside Court. A long time there. That's all I got.
Going back to the HRA.
Yeah.
When again is the construction supposed to start on that?
Won't be till next year.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay, Councilmember Roloff.
Yes, I will also be attending the MMPA annual meeting too. And then I did attend other 2 meetings. One was RPAC, and we were discussing park trails and open space master plan that we are in. It talks about, and then we also talked about how well the actually pickleball is going at the outdoor hockey rink. So we talked about that, and then I also attended the Minnesota River Valley Transit meeting also with Huntington, and one thing that I just wanted to add to that, we also discussed the 2019-2020 funding grant for the transit.
Do we have any idea what the status of that's going to be, or is that something we'll have to wait on and find out?
That is something that we will have to wait on.
Okay. In regards to the RPAC meeting with the Parks and Trails Open Space Master Plan, do we have any idea when that might be coming to City Council?
Hopefully soon. We are trying to finalize it and stuff, and then hopefully we will get it to us here soon.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Kirby.
Just a few things. August 6th, our first community ed meeting in quite some time. I'm looking forward to solidifying our relationship with them. Meeting with Nathan Ward, he's our new Sueur community ed director. So that meeting again is going to be August 6th, 6 p.m. room 204 at the grade school. Last weekend I attended the Minnesota Hospital Board meetings up in Alexandria. That was quite enlightening. We spent 3 days up there with Bob Broder, who else attended, Dave Brown, Kay King, and Randy Baum. And it was very enlightening. and good networking that went on, some good information, so I really enjoyed that. Looking forward to working with them. And we do have a hospital board meeting tomorrow at 4 o'clock, or I'm sorry, that's at 3 o'clock. And then of course we met EDA today, that was at 5:15 here. I think some of you kind of came in towards the end of that, so just kind of went over the business survey that Sam put out. She got 85 responses on that, which I thought was quite good. And we kind of covered the new housing development and how things were going with that. Kind of looked at some of the lots that are proposed out there and kind of tried to decide what the layout would be with that. And we talked about some tax increment.
These 85 responses, what's that to, Councilmember Kirby?
That was for the rev survey. So, all right, that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Director Lawrence, anything to report tonight?
No, thank you.
Okay, Director Kuchera, anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay, City Administrator approval.
Just real quick, we have a personnel and budget committee meeting in less than 12 hours, so we'll be meeting upstairs for that. We're going to be talking about the CIP CEP for 2020 and kind of sharing what we have going on for that. We're making good strides with the budget process, and we'll see where we end up, but we have another planned meeting next week as well. And that's all I have. Thank you.
And the only thing that I had was that I was on K-Check this morning, and hopefully I represent the city with good intention, and certainly publicize the whole giant celebration and the kickoff thing this coming Friday. So if you have an opportunity to make it on down there for the kickoff, that would be wonderful. It'd be nice to have some city council representation down there. Other than that, does anybody else have anything before we close? I'll go ahead and entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Thank you, gentlemen. That was a long one.